So today we're going to go off of a great idea that Zach actually presented, in that we're going to focus on Passover today. In that it's in a week, actually less than a week, right? Because it's the day before the Sabbath. But it's good to review it beforehand. In fact, just FYI, there's a tradition with the rabbis that in fact, this actually goes with the Last Supper, so I'm just going to bring it up now. Sorry, guys. But there's a tradition with the rabbis that the day before Passover, which is the Last Supper, that rabbis will go over with their closest disciples of Passover, of things to talk about and to deal with. I believe that's partly what's going on with the Last Supper. Now, we're not doing it the day before. Some of that is just logistics of our, if anything else, my life, not your guys' life, right? Because I have a family and I can't do this every single night as much as I would love to. But just since I brought up that a little bit, oh no, if I could find, oh, this is the one I want. The Last Supper, I'm just going to do this little highlight right now. It had more to do with the tradition that rabbis met with their closest disciples the night before to help them prepare their own Passover gathering. But the reasons why it can't be the Last Supper cannot be Passover, or here's some highlights, okay? And if we get time at the end of the meeting, we can go into the details. But here's the highlights. Preparation day was after the Last Supper, and scriptures show that. Judas, in the Last Supper, when he left, the other disciples, apostles, thought he was buying things for the Last Supper. Now, if they were having the Last Supper, why would he buying things for the Passover if that was Passover? That just doesn't make any sense, right? You need to get the stuff prepared before the Last Supper. In addition, during Passover, you're not supposed to leave until the morning. Judas left before the morning, right? Because he went to betray, for one, but the others thought he went to go buy things. Now, if it was Passover, everybody knows you can't leave until morning. In fact, I have here's multiple verses about the morning. You can't leave before the morning. You have to eat it before the morning, all that jazz, okay? That's just another point, okay? He left. If that was Passover, he couldn't have left. So there's a mistranslation where they did first, where when you go look at the Greek, it's actually before. The Passover uses unleavened bread, but when you go look at the Greek and the Aramaic for the Last Supper, it used leavened bread. And in Greek and Aramaic, they have two different words for unleavened bread and leavened bread, in both the Greek and Aramaic. Now, I didn't try to go study this in the Hebrew Gospels. We have a website for that. Plus, they don't have an interlinear for that, though. They have been graciously answered me on that on another subject, on the Holy Ghost, but that's a whole nother subject. But anyways, the Last Supper was not Passover, and there's some highlights for you on that. If we get time, we can go over that more. But initially, I think we want to focus of it from Torah, which actually talks about how it needs to be. Okay, so I don't know what to do with this, because I do want to interrupt on these readings to bring out some symbolism that I see in them. You want to read some, Ben? And
sure.
And I just think Exodus, because it's, just going in order of the books is the only reason.
Well, the other reason why Exodus is a good place to start with this is because there's the least controversy surrounding its account regarding the Passover.
That's true. I mean, I didn't prepare for this. I didn't have as much time to prepare as much as I wanted to, but it's in multiple cases in Exodus. I mean, not Exodus, in Genesis also. If we get time, maybe we can look at those.
Yeah.
But anyways, the one where
I'll start
explicitly
reading. I'll
stated
start
is
reading.
Exodus. Okay, go ahead.
I will. I'll start reading, and you interrupt me whenever you have something you want to bring.
Okay.
Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb
Okay, right
according to
there.
the house of their father. Okay.
Okay, the 10th day. I think the 10th day is important. And I know some of people have already heard me saying this, but since we're specifically talking about Passover, I'm going to bring it out again. So this goes back to the creation prophecy. And in fact, maybe let me get that up a little bit. Oh, give me 1 second. But the creation prophecy, it's the creation history and prophecy, right? And in that, if I can find the one that I just want to get up before I show my, well, let's see, stop share, reshare. On this one. So the reasons in this post that I haven't finished is because the temple ceremony has the creation history wrong. But anyways, when you go look at this, the creation prophecy, day 1 goes along with millennium 1, day 2 goes with millennium 2, day 3 goes with millennium 3, day 4 goes with millennium 4. Now it continues on through all through millennium 7. Okay. But the reason I want to stop with 4 is because the 4th millennium is when Yeshua comes. Okay. 4th millennium, 14th day. 3rd millennium, 3rd day, the 13th. The 2nd millennium, 2nd day is the 12th. The 1st millennium and the 1st day is the 11th day. The 10th day is before the foundation of the world. Yeshua was selected to be the lamb before the foundation of the world. We and he knew he would be slain. And that is what in the pre-existence, and that is why we select the lamb on the 10th day, because that is symbolic of selecting him before the foundation of the world. So hopefully that makes sense. I think that's pretty clear. That's actually something that I believe Yahweh gave me. Did you want to say something?
That's actually something. That's actually something that's. It's actually something that's really cool that I've been able to talk to some other people about, and they've noticed and they've noticed that it's pretty cool too. So.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool. I am glad other people like that, because that's something that Yahweh gave to me, and it's not something I've read or heard anybody else talk about. Is that
right?
In fact, I used to ask people why the 10th, because for a while I actually most of my life, even in this waking up process, I didn't know, and nobody knew, and then Yahweh gave it to me, and it completely makes sense to me. In fact, along those lines, day 0 actually is in Genesis 1, and it's a new moon day, and new moon days, when you go read about them in the scriptures, are symbolic of the pre-existence. And so it completely fits the imagery everywhere in the scriptures. But anyways, okay. Also, so take upon them every lamb. So I want to say a little bit more on this lamb here. John stated that Yeshua was the Lamb of God to take away the sins of the world. Now, I don't want to get a whole bunch into this because this is a whole nother subject. Okay. But I will want to say a little bit. It is not the Passover lamb that who's talking about. It was the lamb for the law of Moses, which has been done away with. There's a difference between law of Moses and Torah, and I've talked about that before, and that's not today's focus. It is the lamb of Moses, the lamb from the law of Moses that John was talking about. Now, the lamb during the Passover also represents the Messiah in different ways, in different aspects. But the part that takes away the sins of the world has more to do with the law of Moses lamb. But the deliverance portion of it is definitely in Passover. Okay.
Absolutely. Delivered their children from death, delivered them from the Egyptians.
Yes.
Delivers us from the world.
Correct.
Delivers us from the dust.
So here's the next little part here.
According to the house of their fathers.
Okay, I'm going to stop you here because I'm full of hot air. But there was a lamb selected for the household. And if the household was too small, you could combine households. But it was basically for all those who were gathered together. Just like there was one ultimate lamb in the household of Yahweh Elohim that was slain.
So is it true that families would often gather together for this?
Yes, this is
like a father with his sons and their families would all come together into a single household.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, Mosiah 2-5 is actually tabernacles and not Passover. That's another subject, but you'll see in there they actually gathered together as families also. Same thing with Passover and all these holidays. That it was a family affair, especially a Passover, as we'll get more into more details later. The Passover was selected and slain by the head of the household, not by the Levitical priests. It's the law of Moses lamb that was done by a Levitical priest, which in the Messiah's case, in his, it was done by a Melchizedek priest, as Hebrews brings out, right? But it's just the law of Moses was actually done by an actual priest, where Passover lamb was done by a head of a household who was not a priest. He was just the head of the household.
Yeah. He was just somebody who happened to have a really sharp knife.
Preferably, right? That made it nicer, but
yeah.
not, that's not in the law. But anyways.
That's not that's just me being a little silly.
Yeah, but it would definitely make it easier, right?
Yep.
Oh, and then here's the part that I guess we should have read a little more. A lamb for a house. And the house of Elohim is a people. It's not a temple. And there's actually a JST that shows that. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Oh, that's not the one I want. It's this one. No. Okay. Oh, maybe it's this one. This is one I want. Yeah, I have too many notes. I need to merge some together. What's the gist? Oh, there we go. House. JST, 1 Timothy 3:15. But if any tarried long, that thou mightest know that how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of Elohim, which is the church / assembly of the living Elohim. The house of Elohim are the people, not a building. Okay. That's a JST.
Well, that's actually something that's part of that's actually something that's part of the house of God is the people of God. That's part of regular Hebrew thought.
I agree. And we can get that from Torah. I more brought it up from the JST for those in our faith tradition.
Yeah.
Have a harder time rejecting it, right? With the
Yep,
JST.
yep, yep.
But I agree.
That's true.
Hebrew thought completely. I just did the JST, so that way it's harder to reject it, because without that JST, it says it a little differently. It makes it so it's not so obvious. Anyways, so we're on 4.
Okay, and if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next in unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb.
Now, I'm just going to say something real quick, as we'll find out later. This is because if you can't eat the whole thing, you have to burn it before the morning, and we'll talk about that when we get to that passage. But that's why that's there. Okay.
Mhm. Your lamb shall be without blemish, male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. So even so, does that mean that you're supposed to burn the bones?
I would say no, personally. But that's a good
Okay.
question. I don't have an exact. I think the heat that's required to burn the bones is more than it's typical with a typical fire.
Okay. Okay.
But that's not covered in this verse, so that'll be covered later. But
Okay.
other than my inclination, I don't have a scriptural verse for that, but my inclination is the heat required to burn a bone is hot enough that it's, I would say no. But I would say it's of the flesh and the organs, not the bones, personally.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
But that's my personal understanding. Okay.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Just a question that I figured some people might have.
Sure. And we can get into that symbolism, how I could go either way on that when we get to that verse. It's just, I'd rather focus on when that verse. So one thing here, though, it also
Yeah, when we
says,
get,
sorry, say that again.
yeah, when we get there.
Yeah, but here it says it could be a sheep or a goat. Now, this part can be a little confusing because you could pick a sheep that's among the goats is one way to interpret that. I don't believe that's the case. I believe you could actually specifically have a goat instead of a lamb, but it's preferred to have the lamb. If you can't afford to have a sheep, you can have a goat, is the way that I read that.
Mm-hmm. I guess goats are more common than sheep.
I don't know why they're cheaper, to be honest. Maybe they take less
Well,
food.
I know
don't
in
know.
that region of the world, goats are actually quite common.
And maybe that's what it is. On the symbolism though, I would connect it to Day of Atonement, which is goats, which is
Yeah, I can see that.
symbolizing the same event in a different form
Mhm.
and focusing on different aspects of it. And that's why I would say it could be a goat. I do think
Yeah.
historically, commentaries have stated it can be a sheep or a goat, and sheep is the highly preferred, but if you can't afford it, it can be a goat. And there's other precedents for that in Torah and other places. For example, when Yeshua was born, his physical father and his physical mother gave oh no, my mind just went, a dove, right? A turtle dove, because they couldn't afford the more expensive sacrifices, right? So there is precedence for having cheaper things for sacrifices, okay? And I believe that's what's going on right there.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that making sense. Yep. And you shall keep it. Okay. I think we covered 5, right?
Yeah, we did 5.
And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly and the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening.
So one thing I just remembered, I'm going to backtrack a little bit on 5, that it was take a sheep from among the other sheep or take a goat among the other goats. So in that, there's other symbolism and other examples in the scriptures how the Messiah was going to be among the people. And I believe that is why it's bringing out that it's among the sheep or among the goats, because he was among his people, right?
Right.
It's not just one that was just raised on its own. In fact, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. It was not one that was raised on his own. It was one that was among the people, just as Yeshua was among his people during his mortal ministry and his whole physical life, right? His mortal life.
When it says the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening, is that saying that everybody's going to kill it at the same time, that all the individual people who have their lambs will kill it at the same time?
Approximately the same time. I think it might be a little difficult to do the exact same time, but I do believe that is
Right.
saying the approximate same time. Now, it is interesting. Here's the 14th day. We talked about why I believe the 14th day of the first moon already. And the whole assembly, meaning they, or as we'll look at other places, in fact, I'll just give a little, if I can find in my notes. Here's a couple verses, and there's more that basically talks. It's the head of the household that slays the lamb. Okay, and you can see I have other commentaries on it, but it's the head of the household, and this is why there's a difference between the lamb for the law of Moses and the lamb for Passover. The lamb for the law of Moses had to have a priest do it, a Levitical, or in Yeshua's case, Melchizedek. And the Melchizedek can do things the Levitical does too. So as we know in the restoration. But anyways, this is why another point why it was the law of Moses lamb that John was talking about, especially when you tie it to Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, right? It talks about how a Melchizedek priest was needed for that sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
But here, the whole congregation shall kill a lamb in the evening. So, meaning just the common people. The whole congregation includes the common people. It doesn't say the priests, right? It doesn't say priests here. It says the congregation of Israel, and that is the head of the households. As we look in other verses that clarify that, it never says the priests do the killing.
So is there a particular time? Is there a particular time then that does this actually state a particular time? Because it says in the evening, but that's a watch.
Yeah. So this is where it gets a little tricky. If I would do it, I would do it between the evenings, because there's other places, especially when you look in the New Testament, Yeshua was killed between the evenings, okay?
Right.
Which is basically 3 o'clock in the modern clock, give or take, right? It's not exactly, because it's off of the sundial, not a mechanical clock. And so if you're going to actually go to the part where you're going to kill a lamb, if you're able to go to that extent, I would kill it as close to between the evenings, which is technically between high noon and sunset, which is give or take around 3 o'clock. Okay. If you could do it around that time, I would say that's the best time. In fact, when Yeshua died was then, and then it was dark for 3 hours, right? And then it was evening. But rabbinic tradition, which has its problems, but it kind of states between the evenings till the evening is when they would sacrifice it. But at the same time, that tradition is partly because they say it was the Levitical priests that were killing them. And I don't believe scripture supports the Levitical priest doing this killing. Okay. In fact,
Right.
during this Exodus here, the Levitical priests weren't even chosen yet, right? That came later. That
Right.
came at Mount Sinai. So, I mean, it's the whole congregation, meaning the heads of the household. It's the head of the family
Yeah, pretty much.
that
Pretty
did this.
much.
And
It's-
I do lean towards between the evenings on this evening portion right here, because technically in Hebrew thought, evening starts after high noon because it's the sunset is starting to go down, and that's what evening means. And there's two of them, two main evenings, high noon or just a second after, right? Because that's when it's starting to go down, and sunset.
Right.
Um,
That makes sense.
but I'm inclined to do in between the evenings if that's when you're gonna do the actual killing of it. If you go that far. On that point, it's not here yet, but since we're talking about this a little bit, if you can buy your lamb, even if it's not a live one, I would do it on the 31st this year, which is the 10th day of the first moon. And because that's the day you're supposed to select it. Okay. Which hinds are another side subject to me that proves the lunar Sabbath and the lunar solar calendar, because in fact, one of the reasons why rabbis in their modern calendar have postponement days is because they know the 10th day of the first moon cannot be a Sabbath.
Right.
And it's not biblical to have postponement days. That started when the Catholic Church forced them to follow a continuous 7-day week. That's when postponement days started with the Hillel second calendar. But anyways, I have an unfinished post that gets into details, multiple details, how the Passover with Yeshua proves the lunar Sabbath calendar and Sabbath, along with the day starting at the morning. There's just so many details there. But anyways, hopefully I'm not sidetracking a little bit, but
Well, let's get back to the Passion.
so let's go back to 7. I think we're on verse 7 now.
Yes, we are in verse 7. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts on the upper door post of the houses wherein they shall eat it.
So
so there that's actually talking about striking it. We're talking about broad brush stroke.
correct. Yeah. So if for some reason you don't feel comfortable with the blood, because I do believe the blood is an internal portion to do, and it should be done with lamb's blood or goat's blood as a substitute, as we talked about a little bit ago. But if you can't do that for some reason, I think one thing you could do is to put
we're gonna do red streamers.
Yeah, red streamers are good. I was going to suggest red paper, but red streamers, I could see that definitely being good. As in going to close to this as you can. Because some people are living in apartments, for example, and I think the owners would frown upon the actual real blood, but I mean, that's decoration, right? That's like the pagan holidays with their wreaths. It's just a decoration to do a red streamer or red paper, right?
Yeah.
And so that could be do as close to what you can to the text, right?
Yeah.
So it's the upper and then the two sides, right? And there's connections to that I believe goes along with the cross, because those are those are actually wood posts. Those are tree. Even when the houses were made out of bricks, the door posts were trees, right?
Yeah. Right.
So
okay. So on the two sides. Okay.
So I think we're on.
Now we're in verse 8.
Yes.
And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Bitter herbs, stuff like parsley.
Would garlic can be considered bitter?
I wouldn't personally, but I don't know specifically. I wouldn't call
I don't
garlic
find garlic
bitter.
bitter, but when we're talking about bitter herbs, we're talking about green herbs,
Okay,
green herbs that are not necessarily terribly pleasant to the taste.
rosemary probably.
By themselves are not terribly pleasant to the taste.
Right, rosemary is not
Well,
very all that
garlic's
pleasant.
like
Right.
that. I mean, I like garlic, but it's
Yeah,
gotta
but
be
we're looking
careful
at
with it,
green.
right?
We're talking about green herbs. Garlic is
Yeah.
more of a bold.
Oh, that's true. It is herbs and garlic is more of a. You're correct on that.
So
It's more of a
I'm
seed.
thinking stuff
Garlic
like-
is a
Yeah.
seed.
I'm thinking more along the lines of parsley, cilantro. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right, and a couple thing here, and we'll get into this in a little bit more in some other passages, but you have till sunrise to eat it, because from sunset to sunrise is the night, right? And you only have till the night to eat it. And the other thing, you roast it with fire. And so I think the fire is symbolic, and there's some other verses that I think bring it out more, but I'll talk a little bit of it right now. I do believe, and it'll become more obvious later, that this deals with baptism of fire, or the baptism of justification.
Yes.
That's why it's with fire.
Yep.
And it'll get
I-
more
I think-
obvious later.
Yeah,
I
this is
think.
a symbol. This is a symbol for justification. This is a symbol for justification.
Correct. And then especially unleavened bread. So unleavened bread in most people's minds only has a negative connotation to it, but they tend to forget that in the New Testament, Yeshua likened the kingdom of heaven to 3 measures of meal of unleavened bread, or leavened bread.
Like-
Sorry, leavened. Sorry, go ahead.
Would that be like cornbread, or would that be like what?
So I think it's specifically more wheat, or maybe even barley bread would be
Okay.
my inclination
But
on that.
no yeast. So basically, it's no yeast.
Correct. So
And-
let me pause for one. Zoom recording. Okay, so we're back now. So I think we're on verse 8.
9.
No, oh yeah, we roasted with
Roast
fire.
with
Okay,
fire. We
Yeah, yeah.
roasted with fire already.
and we talked about the bitter
Um,
herbs. Okay, so
Yes,
verse
and we
9.
did talk about the bitter herbs. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs, and with the pertinence thereof.
Pertinence is your innards.
You're supposed, so apparently you're supposed to cook them, but not. But if you cook them and don't eat them, you still have leftovers.
Well,
You're
actually,
supposed to burn. You have leftovers, you burn them.
actually let's go to the 8. I do want to go to the 1828 dictionary on that word, because I didn't know that one. So where'd it go? That one.
I did a quick search on pertinence earlier today, and it's talking about innards. That's from the Greek.
I'll take your word for it. I want to do dictionary, and maybe we'll look at Bible Hub, just so that way it's all clear, right?
Yep.
Appendage. I have no idea what that word is.
Let's go to appurtenance, where you have a link on it. You have a link to the word.
You mean you don't know that word? I think that's the first word that I've come across. You didn't know what it was.
P-U-R-T-E-N-A-N-C-E, right?
No, it's referring us to another word.
Oh, I
Thank you.
see.
Yeah, let's click on that and see what they do with it.
I did. It's appendance, but applied to the pluck of an animal. I don't know what a pluck of an animal is.
Yeah, so let's go to Bible Hub.
Yeah, because here it's referencing the verse, actually. So I think the best place is Bible Hub.
You're right. Okay.
You could also check out the word clock.
Well,
but how many
that-
times do you want me to go in the dictionary where it was not very clear? I'm prone at this point.
Yeah, how many times do
But
we,
clock could be actually
but let's
defined.
go into the scriptures.
I agree.
Okay,
I
so actually the Berean
Oh,
Standard
yeah.
Bible actually puts it the innard parts, but let's
Mhm. Mhm.
let's do the interlinear. And so here inward parts
It says
means-
inward part, midst.
yeah, that's going to be the organs, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
Kedip. Yep.
So let's just see it in the interlinear. Oh, look, actually, here's a word that they don't translate. That's interesting. Because
But the word
okay, but we're looking at the
entrail, it's
inward.
entrails.
Chitlin.
It's this
Right here, right here.
Sorry.
It's entrails.
yeah, inner parts, the middle parts. Yeah, that's going to be the organs.
Yep.
Okay, so if you can cook the whole lamb, which is the preferred, if you can go that far, cook it with the innards.
Yep.
All right, because that's
The whole
7130.
thing.
7130. Yeah, that's the same one. And let's see it here. Entrails, that sounds like the same thing, but let's go see.
Yeah.
It's inwards, yeah. So it's the organs. I guess you just don't eat the organ parts because
Yeah, just-
it's not
Have
specifically
lamb chitlins.
specified, but I do tend to believe that the organs aren't kosher. I that's kind of a controversial subject, though. It's anyways. I
So
would
that's an
suggest not.
interesting thing. So that's an interesting thing. If the organs aren't kosher, why is he telling them to cook it with the organs? I guess the lamb's supposed to be cooked on a spit, and then the organs will
Well,
be there anyway.
actually, most pictures do show it on a spit. I know I've used that for my Good Friday post. That maybe I'll just show that real quick, just so we can see the picture.
The innards would
I
be
know.
there, just naturally.
Yeah.
So, one symbolism that I could see from that is how you're supposed to have the law written on your inward parts. And
Mhm.
if this is symbolic, the fire part symbolic of baptism of fire / justification, I can see that. 'Cause that's when you're starting to get it on your inward parts, right? I can see that.
Right.
That would be my inclination on what that is
Yeah.
teaching us. But here's this little
Or
picture that
the-
a kid drew that I kind of like, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of like
Or
this one
the-
because it doesn't have to be something. A lot of people make Passover complicated since we have this picture up. It doesn't have to be, okay? Seders were something that the Orthodox / Pharisee Jews started when the temple was destroyed at 70 AD. It's not in the scriptures. That is something that
Yeah,
they
there's-
added later.
Yeah, you won't find a single Seder thing in the scripture.
No,
But
and the Last Supper, as we already went over a little bit, if we have time, we'll go more over later. In fact, I should give the link to that video that I think is pretty good. It goes over it just so it's in the oops, I hit the wrong button, but I can still get it. So if we don't get to go over it, there's the details. They did a very good job. But my main thing is here, I like this picture because it just shows it doesn't have to be something complicated as people make it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because here's a little kid's drawing of it on this spigot, right? So I mean, here it doesn't
Yeah,
show the
there's
head,
dad-
so it's
and
not
there's
a
dad outside.
perfect picture, but I do in general like this picture.
And outside roasting the lamb on a spit.
Yeah, and it's roasting it on the fire. But here we saw inward parts, and I was not aware of that part, so it's a good thing that we brought that out. But my inclination of my interpretation is we're supposed to have the law written upon our hearts, which starts to happen at the baptism of fire / justification, right? That's how I would read that.
It's
Um,
also taking, if you think about it though, from another perspective, what did Christ say in the implementation of the Last Supper, right? He said, take this, eat in remembrance of my body. If we are actually taking in the law, which is of Christ, and we wish to become of the body of Christ, then we will take, it's further.
to go along with what you're saying, you are what you eat,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, more, yeah,
And
pretty much.
you are what you eat, and bread represents the law, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Which is Yeshua's flesh, right? Or symbolically, anyways, not literally, symbolically.
The reason why unleavened bread and why you're supposed to take your bread starter and get rid of your bread starters with your yeast, with its lump of yeast. It's symbolically removing the leaven of the world from your doctrine.
Correct, which is the timing is completely perfect, because this is the time that you're starting to really accept the Messiah. So this is when you should really start letting go of the doctrines, teachings of the world, or Pharisees, in addition to which are actually the Orthodox now. Literally, the Orthodox are the Pharisees.
The Orthodox Jews and the Orthodox Jewish rabbis take great pride in being able to trace their ordination all the way back to the Pharisees of the first century.
Correct. And I don't want to spend time on that right now because that's a little side note. But
Yep,
Orthodox
that's
Pharisees are the same thing. But yes,
and you shall let nothing. Yep, sorry.
Well, I want to keep
thereof,
doing a little bit more on 9.
Okay. Okay.
So one thing I think that helps us see that this is more the baptism of fire, and see how you're not supposed to cook it with water. Now, we can go look at that word sodden real quick. So let me go, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't use sodden in common language.
Sodden with water, it's sullied, it's to make dirty. Soggy.
Sodden with water is actually it's more boiled seed.
Yeah.
Yep, it's not supposed to be boiled.
That's
Right. And that's just from what I know, that's what my inclination is, boiled, but I wanted to make sure. Now, if you boiling means you're submersed in water, right? And submersion in water, baptism actually literally means immersed in water, which is how you would boil something, which is why I would say another reason why this Passover, and with it being fire, represents baptism of fire, aka baptism of justification.
Yeah.
Because you're not supposed to boil it. You're not supposed to immerse this lamb in water.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, at
which
this
is
point,
also symbolic of the fact, and the fact that it was only supposed to be Israel that participates in the Passover is
right.
is symbolic of the fact that you have to have entered into the covenant in order to receive actual justification.
Which back then and even now, it's more obvious in modern times that to enter the church / Israel, you are baptized, and you have to have already have done that to partake of this meal, right? So
which is a double witness to this idea that roasting the lamb in fire is a reference to baptism of fire justification.
Right. And so the reason that I am inclined to think the head has to be included is because Yeshua is our head, and we can't take him off in this process. We without him, we're damned, right? And he is the head of the church, or the head of the body of the church. He is the head. And the reason I would say that we need the legs is because the legs represent our walk with the Messiah.
Right.
And you can't eat the hoofs. And so the legs are the closest that you can get to that symbolism. But either way, the legs are the ones that make the feet work, right? It has to do with the walk. And yeah, anyways. And then the innards, I believe it has to do with how we're supposed to have the law written upon our innard parts, as I brought out in All Things You Can Do. And we can go look at that, but I mean, it's all over the place, right?
Yeah, there's not supposed to be a bit of that lamb that is left.
Right. And there's some symbolism with there, and I'll get into that when we get there. I think we're on verse 10 now.
Yes. Yes.
You willing to keep reading, Ben, or do you want someone else?
I would love to, but I'm stuck on the dictionary.
Oh, silly me. Thank you. I sorry, my bad. Okay, verse 10.
And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire.
Okay, so I see two things with this. So the two things I see is that we have until our death to either follow Yeshua or not, to do our works. And that's why it's till the morning, because the morning is the end of the day, which is symbolic in this case, the end of our life. And the reason I see that we have to burn what was not eaten, I think goes along with hell, actually, because those who don't partake of the lamb are going to burn. And that's what I see that pointing to.
Right. That makes sense.
It's not that Yeshua wants them to burn,
So
because he wants them to accept him. It's that their indignation and their gnashing of teeth and them thinking that they were right when they were wrong is what's going to make them burn.
And so it's a juxtapositional. So it's kind of a juxtapositional relationship. And so that which you do not consume, that which you do not consume is burned. Whereas when it comes to the Savior, those who do not consume of the Savior
completely,
are burned.
Yeah, those who do not consume the Savior completely are burned in their mind, in their heart, and in hell, right?
Yeah.
And so I just, as we keep going, I just see a lot of parallels and symbolism in the actual ordinance, not the Seder, and we'll probably talk about a few things from the Seder later if we have time. They actually kind of contradict scriptures to some degree. But anyways, so verse.
Well, they definitely set up some contradictions.
In fact, maybe we'll talk about one real quick in this verse since we brought it up.
Yes. This is the primary contradiction between Seders and between the Seder Passover and the way it's supposed to be done.
Yeah.
And thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded. Okay, I know my internet connection's unstable. Could you please go away so that I can read? And thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste, fast. It is the Lord's Passover.
So I think we'll just start at the first. Your loins girded. That is a Hebrew idiom saying that you're ready to go to leave, and to leave fast, and even to war, right?
There actually was a way of girding your loins so that you'd be ready to move. Even with
While you're speaking, I'll go get a picture of it.
Even with even with the long shirt that they wore, you could gird your loins such that you could be able to run and move quickly, and
Yeah.
be able to do. Yes, this is it right here.
Yeah. So hopefully that's what girding your loins is. And it's so that you could run and be fast. And there's, there could be multiple reasons for that. Right. But
Mhm.
mainly be prepared to leave or to move fast, which that's what haste actually means, is fast, right? Because it's harder to run with dresses. I mean, Kesley could probably tell us better than I could, just because she's a female, and guys don't wear this type of clothing for the most part. I mean, there's a few cultures that do, but not the culture I grew up in the United States. But I'm sure Kesley could speak to this more than. Can you run fast in a dress? Is it easy?
No, and every time you do run or have to go up the stairs or whatever, you do hold it up like that.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Well, I've never seen a girl gird up their dress.
Oh, yeah. If I were to run in a dress, I would definitely hold it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sister missionaries might do something along those lines when they were only allowed
When
to
they're
wear
riding their
dresses,
bikes.
riding their
When they're
bikes,
riding
and
their
only
bikes.
can only wear dresses,
There's a
where
little
now
bit.
they can wear pants, but still, even when they wear a dress, they may do something close to some degree like this while riding a bike, right?
Yeah, the sister missionaries on my mission that had to ride bikes, they would do something similar to that. They would kind of tie their dresses around their legs like pants.
Yeah, because you just, like Kesley said, you can't really run in a dress.
Yeah.
So, but that goes along. Let's go back. I'll make sure I share the screen this time, not like last time. Right here. That goes along with fast, right? Being ready to leave and with haste. Is same thing, I think.
Whereas in the Seder,
Go ahead.
yeah. Whereas in the Seder meal, the Seder Passover, you are reclined on couches.
Like you're relaxed, which is completely
You're
opposite of
practically
this.
lying down as you eat them.
Yeah, the ones that I've seen, they'll say reclined, not laid down, or at least
Yeah.
you know, going back, kind of. I mean, you can't see me too well because it's, but you know, leaning backwards, relaxed,
Yeah.
which is not girding your loins and not in haste, for sure. I mean, I guess you could do that with your shoes on your feet, but the point for having your shoes on your feet is that you're ready to go. It's same with staff in your hand, right? And staff in your hand can mean go along with multiple things in my mind. A staff has to do with authority, and Yeshua is our authority, and we're supposed to go with him. And hand has to do with our works, which means to follow the law and the things that we're doing. In addition, the staff has to do with the stick, and a stick can be symbolic of a tribe. And this would go along with one of my favorite quotes that I think is actually authentic from Joseph Smith, is to take other people by the hand and bring them to heaven with you, as in helping other people, your tribe, to do what's correct, to know what's correct and do what is correct, so that they can go live with Yahweh also. There's a couple of things I get on that.
If only the tribe understood.
Well, our little tribe does, right? That we have right here.
Yeah. This tribe understood.
Yeah. And we talked in haste. It's, you know, prepared to go fast. It's not being lazy. Like pretty much every Seder that I've looked at states to do, right? Relax, no big deal. It is
You are Lord
Yahweh's
of the
Passover.
universe. Yeah. You are the Lord of the universe's people. You don't have to worry about a thing. That's basically the idea behind the Seder.
Yeah, well, anyways, that's false traditions, and In the New
But you-
Testament, Yeshua talks about he could make people out of these stones, or I think it was followers out of these stones,
Yeah,
if I remember
make
correctly.
follower, make, John the Baptist is talking, and he says, do not say unto yourselves, we have Abraham to our father, for I say unto you, the Lord can raise up from these stones children unto Abraham.
Oh, okay. Did you want to say something, Zach?
But for this, we can be sitting down, just not like reclining.
Oh yeah, you can sit down. I would just say don't recline, because
Yeah.
reclining I think is too comfortable, and you're not ready to leave, which is a lot of the big point up here.
Well,
And also I think it
here's
goes
the thing.
against haste, as in fast.
I think the reason why the Passover is meant to be eaten this way is because the Lord's judgments will begin on Passover.
At
And
midnight.
we must be prepared, and we must be prepared to leave.
Correct. And it's at midnight, right, that those things happen, which I would say, as I've talked about at other times, connects to the 10 virgins, and it also connects to I'm forgetting the thief in the night, because that's at midnight.
Yep.
So I believe both of those.
I mean,
have to do with-
not saying that necessarily the Lord comes on Passover, but his judgments begin.
Yeah,
on
that's the
Passover.
judgments. So on that point, I do, there's some things how he may come to some people beforehand. But when he comes to the world, I do believe that is tabernacles, which goes along with even the theme of that one, which is not today's theme. But
Right.
but along those lines, he went to Moses, which told Moses to
Yep.
do these things. So, but anyways, that's another deep subject. I don't have
Yep.
completely figured out myself. But anyways, I think that's pretty good for verse 11.
Yeah, I think we've covered that pretty well, and we've also covered why Seder is not necessarily the best way to be doing your Passover.
Yeah. Zach, are you?
But
Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
you
go
want to read some, Zach? I'm getting
yeah.
my part.
Sure.
Okay, so let's go 12.
For I will pass over. Oh, sorry. I will pass through. I didn't know why I saw
That's fine.
over. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and I will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am Yahweh.
So I can see a couple things. Here it says night. I actually didn't look at the Hebrew behind this. We could do that, but I would wonder if it's more midnight than just night. Just as I think everybody knows it happens at midnight, right? Sometimes there's definitely English translation issues in the King James. It's the one I grew up with, and it's generally one I use most of the time, but it has its problems. Okay. But this is where judgments happen. And in this case, it's the firstborns of those who have not left Egypt behind, or their gods. And part of it, I would say, is because that it was the firstborn sons that Egypt killed not too long before this.
Yeah, the thing is that the interesting thing is that this is people who left Egypt were not just Israelites.
Oh no,
It
it
was
was a
a
mixed
mixed,
multitude.
There was a mixed multitude that left Egypt.
Yeah.
So my question is, were there other people who were not Israelites who participated in the Passover? Or did all these people who were not Israelites lose a firstborn child?
So the account doesn't actually state one way that I'm aware of, but I do have a tendency to believe that some did, participate in Passover, but I think also more joined after because they saw the power of Yahweh and they were convinced
Okay.
because of
Makes
that.
sense.
But
makes
that is a personal opinion. Text doesn't actually state that, but I do think it is
I
justified.
mean, it's something that would make sense.
But for sure, it was a mixed multitude that left Egypt. And we get that even when talking about the Sinai event, it's a mixed multitude, where a lot of people who don't want to follow the law will want to focus on how it was just Israel, but that's not the case. It was a mixed multitude. Yahweh's been for everybody from the beginning. It's just Israel was supposed to take it to others, which most of the time they didn't do, right?
Most of the time, they were pretty good at failing.
Yeah, in fact, Acts 15 is basic, or not 15, Acts 10 is about Peter letting go of that false traditions of the Jews of not talking to the Gentiles, because the law actually talks how you're supposed to give it to everybody. But anyways, that's a side subject.
Everyone just lost fucking self-service in Waco for like 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm in a meeting right now. We'll need to talk later.
Okay. So sorry about the
No, we
little
did-
interruption.
We did do 12.
Oh, we did? Oh,
I had a little
oh, we
comment
started to. Yeah,
um,
okay. Jack had a
You had a
second.
comment.
on gods of Egypt. He's mentioning. I heard that all the plagues had something to do with
Yeah,
the
domain of the false gods.
their gods.
I've
Yeah.
come across that also. And I think there
Especially a
is
big
some
big
truth to
screw
that.
you. know?
Yeah, because the frogs is a false god.
It was
The cows were false
basically
gods.
what he was doing is he was vanquishing their gods one by one.
Well, I think it was more showing that their supposed gods actually have no power.
Yeah.
And they're not
Yeah,
real.
the only one that his Pharaoh's priest could actually come close to emulating was the snakes.
So on that's an interesting subject. I actually, and you're referring to when Moses first came to Pharaoh and threw down this, and Aaron threw down the stick. I believe that's actually a bad translation. I believe it's actually alligators, not snakes. In fact, that's actually why I believe Peter Pan is with alligators, is because of what it actually should be. And there are some good sources for that. I mean, that's a side subject, but I actually do believe it was alligators, although most translations do show snakes, because alligator was one of the false gods. And I don't know Egypt's gods very well, but I don't think one of them was a snake, to be honest, but an alligator. I do.
There is a legged serpent god in Egypt.
Oh yeah, that's right. So I guess I'm not sure why it was an alligator then, but I do believe it was an alligator. But anyways,
you mean a crocodile?
Or crocodile.
Okay,
Well, alligator, crocodile. I don't really know the difference between those two. I'll be honest.
One's longer, one's fatter.
Really?
Yeah. Anyways, I've looked it up before. I don't ever remember, but I think Zach had a comment.
I don't remember all of them. Just remember like 4 of them.
Yeah,
there's like Anubis, Set, Isis, and Amun-Ra.
Anubis is, I think, more of a dog one, if I remember correctly.
It's the face of a jackal.
A jackal.
Jackal.
Well, that's a dog, if I remember right, or that family.
It's an African wolf. Yes.
Yeah, which is a dog. But that's also what Batman is based off of primarily, too. Although they've kind of twisted the imagery with bats, but that's what Batman is him. But anyways, that's a side subject. Sorry.
We're getting out of here.
Yeah. But look here where I'm going to put in here, will execute judgment. And so judgment as in because they were committing gross sins, right? And that's why they were put to death, is because of breaking of the law. But also, I think another reason for it being the firstborn is because the firstborns are Yahweh's, right? In the law, they're Yahweh's. And that's why we have a redeeming price. So that way, anyways, that gets into another side subject. I don't want to get into that.
Another side subject within the law.
Yeah. But that is within the law. So, all right. So I think that's pretty good with verse 12. If anybody else wants to add anything.
No. Yeah,
So let's go to verse
move on.
13. You willing to keep reading, Zach?
Sure. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you, when I smite the land of Egypt.
So I think the big thing for me in this verse shows that Yahweh is the angel of death. He is the one that did the killing. And another thing is the blood is the token, as in the blood of the Lamb or the blood of the Messiah is what saves us.
Those under the blood of the Lamb are those who will not be destroyed by the 10th plague.
And it's those who are in his house, like the token upon the house. The token of Yahweh's house is the blood of the Lamb, right?
Yep.
And fully accepting it. And this is, I think, is why it's called Passover, because he passed over those who had that token. Because the others, they had a curse. And those who accept the blood as their token, the curse passed over them, hence Passover, at least in English, right? And they weren't destroyed, or in this case, especially when you go to D&C 76, even the Terrestrial people accept Yahweh. It's those who go to the outer darkness who don't even aren't overcome the second death or the spiritual death are destroyed. And I see that here also, right?
Yeah.
Because there's one kingdom, three glories, contrary to what churches teach on that. We actually go look at D&C 76. And so there's two main separations, right? Accept Yahweh or you don't. If you accept him, you get passed over. If you don't, you get the curse.
You don't.
Yeah.
If you don't, you don't.
It's the two ways, right? Which is big in 2 Nephi 2. And actually also Deuteronomy 13 and 18 for, staying with the law. But anyways, it's all over the place. It's even in the Ohio mounds. It's the two ways. But anyways, that's a side subject.
That's another subject for another.
Yeah. All right. So you want to read 14, Zach?
And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever.
So
Forever.
I don't know, what does forever mean?
Now, what forever means is until the resurrection of Christ.
Look, there's a space between for and ever. Okay, it's not together. It's not connected. There's a space.
That must be why people think you don't during the times of the Gentiles, is because of that space right there, right?
Yeah, there you go. That's it. You got it, Stephen. You understand.
Yeah, I know that space there is translation. But anyways, but
Well, and it's one of many translational errors in the King James Version, which is
Yeah.
what, and because the church uses the King James Version of the Bible, that's why there's so much fighting so much of fighting in the law, fighting against the law in the church from members of the church.
sure. And I mean, I generally stick to it, but like I do like
For
the
my-
Berean Study Bible. I have using Bible Hub. I've learned to enjoy that one, but I do read the
From
King
my
James
understanding,
most.
from my understanding, the King James Version of the Bible is short of some of the more modern translations, it is the most lawless translation I have ever laid eyes on.
Of the ancient ones, I would agree with that. But it's the most common one, even with the modern day world, or at least the New
Yeah.
King James Version. Anyways, but throughout your generations, there is no space included into that one. Well, I mean, I guess there's two spaces, right, through the three words, but you can't take anyways. So there is some
Throughout, but
space
still,
there.
throughout your generations, forever. How can you mistake that? How can you say that this is irrelevant? How can anyone ever say that this is irrelevant?
Right.
I don't
Either
understand.
forever
I honestly,
and throughout your generations.
the reason why I take a mocking tone when I talk about this kind of thing is because I can't understand how rational people can say that this is irrelevant.
Well, I agree. And I mean, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but the stuff that deals with the law of Moses, which is separate from this is included in Torah, doesn't say forever or throughout your generations, right? So, but anyways, that's another subject, but just so people aware, because I know people say otherwise about this on me. I don't push law of Moses. In fact, I say the law of Moses is done away with at Yeshua's death. It was nailed at the cross, but Torah is still valid, and they're different. And the Book of Mormon teaches that, but that's another discussion. Now, for a memorial, I do believe, and there's some other verses later that hopefully we have time to look at that brings out how we should remember this event as a memorial, right? When we look back at this, because there's
the word translated into memorial is often also can also mean mention,
which means you bring up this event, right? So in fact, since you bring that up, let's go to Bible Hub and let's go show that, right? I guess I should have kept it open even though I closed it. I don't always think everything through. Anyways, so that's 14. Here
this is
I think that's the memorials they're putting celebrate. Oh no, there's a memorial right there. So let's go look at that. Remember. Memorial remembrance. So when part of Passover is remembering.
Okay, this is actually a different word, and so it would be a different thing. Zikaron is not the same thing as zechor. So zechor, when they use the word zechor, it's also a memorial or mention. So
okay,
and that's actually the word zechor is actually the word used when he talks about I am Yahweh. It's his zechor.
okay.
It's what we're supposed to call him to all people.
So
it's a name to be spoken.
Here, memorial, I think looking more in the Hebrew, it means that we're supposed to remember this event, and that's why.
My point is that
sorry, go ahead.
And that was my point, is that this word is slightly different from the one that I was thinking. It's both of those are Hebrew words, but it's different words. And this one definitely is about memorial and remembrance.
Sure. They have some overlap with each other, but yeah, or a root. But here, I do believe we should remember the event in Egypt, specifically because of all the symbolism that's going along with it, and that all the things that we can learn from it. As I mean, here we just talked about, there's a lot more verses we can go over, but oh, actually, I need to share the right window again. Sorry about that. But even as we just looked at these 14 or no, 12 verses here, there's quite a bit of imagery in there that actually points us to Yahweh, right? And what he did for us and how we come to him and what he does for us.
The facts of the matter are all of these feasts are relevant when it comes for the second coming. All of these feasts.
Yes, I do believe the second coming is going to start with Passover. So
We just don't know which one here.
We don't know which year it will be, but I do believe it's going to start with Passover, and I do believe the Book of Mormon shows that with was it 35:8, if I remember correctly, but anyways, that's sidetracking, so I don't want to go too much in
But
there.
anyway, Exodus 12:18.
So Kesley, are you willing to read some?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, maybe Zach can read this one, and then you can read the next little group.
Okay.
So this one skips a little bit, but Zach, will you read 18 real quick?
In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at even, shall eat unleavened bread until the 120th day of the month at evening. This is Feast of Unleavened Bread.
So this kind of deals with multiple holidays. Obviously, the 14th is the Passover, and it says that while we're eating the lamb that was just killed and roasted, that we're supposed to have unleavened bread with it. Okay. And then it brings up a little bit more. I think it's more because the continuation of the unleavened bread. It brings up how you're supposed to have unleavened bread until the 21st day of the moon, that is the 21st day is the last day of unleavened bread. So it's just saying continue it up to the evening, right? So after evening on the 21st, you can start having leavened bread again. But anyways, don't just try to do it early just because you want to, but yeah. Okay. But this is, I think this is also adds somewhat to the confusion that some Jews say that Passover is part of unleavened bread, and it's not. They're two separate things, but they do both share of eating unleavened bread with each other, right? Which is symbolic of letting go of the teachings of the world, which when we accept the Messiah, we're supposed to start doing that, right? To let go of the traditions of the world and the teachings of the Pharisees. So, in fact, one last thing I'll say on this, there are traditions, and there are some scriptures on this too, but I don't have them handy, that the 22nd or the day after unleavened bread is also a Sabbath. And on the lunar solar calendar, which is used by lunar Sabbatarians, the 22nd is literally a Sabbath. And also the first day of unleavened bread is a holy convocation or a high holiday. Which is a weekly Sabbath also, because that's the 15th, which is always a Sabbath on the month in the lunar solar calendar. So I'll just tell you, the lunar solar calendar really makes the high holidays, especially these weekly ones, unleavened bread and tabernacles it just makes more sense, and it gets rid of the arguments that the different sects have. It's because the different sects will focus on different aspects, but with the lunar solar calendar, it unifies them. Not to
you can satisfy all aspects of it.
That's a better way of saying it, because the unify can have a other connotation with it that can be somewhat bad. But anyways, next to the next section, maybe let's have Kesley read these ones.
Okay.
Let's start with 21. So this is still in Exodus 12. So let's go with that.
Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover.
So here, there's a false tradition with the Orthodox and / Pharisee Jews that it had to be killed by the Levites. But look at here. The elders, that doesn't say Levite. The elders.
There weren't Levites.
Well, yeah, there weren't Levites at this time, but even later on, here's just saying the head of the households, go take your lamb and kill it. This is Passover lamb was killed by the head of the household.
And the head of the household was the oldest man in that household.
Correct. As in, it could be the father and his sons, right? And their families. The daughters would go into the families of the family that they were married into. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that interruption. That was just my sweet wife reminding me to do something. But anyways.
So this is, what I see here. Draw out, take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover. It seems like this was something where they all kind of got together and selected their lamb. The heads of households selected their lambs.
Correct.
From a communal herd or something.
Yes, yeah. This was not priests doing it. This was head of households killing the lamb, which to me is another evidence that the law of Moses, that the lamb that John the Baptist was talking about is the law of Moses lamb, not the Passover lamb. Because when you add that to Hebrews, it was a priest that had to do that. And specifically in Yahweh's case was the Melchizedek priest, right? But anyways.
Yes, I can see that.
So, Kesley, I think that's pretty good on that verse there, right? So maybe we can have Kesley read verse 22.
Okay. And you shall take a bunch of, is it hyssop?
I think it's hyssop, but
Hyssop.
Yeah.
And dip it in the blood. Dip it in the blood that is in the basin and strike the lintel and the two side posts with the blood that is in the basin, and none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning.
So, I mean, this is like Yeshua on the cross is how I take it. The lintel.
Now, this is really interesting. This is really interesting because that really reminds me of that passage in Psalms where David says, purge me with hyssop and I shall be cleansed.
Yeah, it's referring to this because it's what happens on this day and on the last mortal day of Yeshua. It's this right
so
here.
when people say that the Hebrews had no conception of redemption through the blood, they are liars.
Yeah, they are. On top of that, their old commentaries actually bring out how Isaiah 53 was the Messiah, as in the Yeshua. They knew it pointed to a person back then, and they were waiting for that person. It's only after that and that they hated him that they tried to turn it into a nation. All the old commentaries talk about how they knew there was going to be a Messiah like Yeshua who was going to come. The problem is they told him that their false traditions were wrong and that he called out their wickedness, and they hated him for it instead of listening to him. And that's why they have contradicted, their new commentaries contradict their old commentaries on this point. Because they hate Yeshua.
And here's another And here's another really cool point here, right at the very end. That, and none of you shall go out of the door, go out at the door of his house until the morning. We wish to be under the blood of the Lamb. We need to stay in the house until we die.
Correct. Because the morning is the end of the day, and which this points to enduring to the end. Also, this is a specific verse that brings out how the Last Supper was not Passover, because Judas left before the morning.
Yep.
Right? Which is sunrise. This is talking, morning is the morning can be interpreted multiple ways, but I'm just going to leave it at this because this is a sidetrack. It's sunrise. Right. And actually Yeshua left before sunrise also, right? Because he went to the garden. So
And if he had broken the, and if he had if that had happened on Passover, he would have been breaking the law.
right, because right here it says you can't leave the door of the house until the morning, right?
Which means he would not have been fit to do the sacrifice.
Right, because he would have broken the law, which means he would have broken a bone. But anyways, he wouldn't have been fit because he had committed a sin, and you have to be sinless. So I think that's pretty good out of that verse right there. Will you read 23, Kesley?
For Yahweh will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts, Yahweh will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you.
So one thing I want to bring out, it was the fact that you had blood, or Yeshua's blood, upon your house is what made it so the Yahweh, or in this case, the angel of destruction, the angel of death, would pass over you. Now, I looked at this word and I have a little note here, destroyer. Well, I think making it destroyer, I think is a bad translation, and purposely to make it look like it's Yahweh who's not the angel of death. Because when you go look at the word up here, it's actually translates to ruin. It doesn't actually point to a person like ER makes it. And I think a better way to translate it will not suffer the destruction to come into your houses to smite you, instead of the just actual destroyer.
But there's an interesting thing. There's an interesting thing that occurs here when you look at this verse in comparison with Doctrine and Covenants, section 89.
All right, let's go get that up. DNC 89.
Right at the very end, the promises
Okay.
to those who obey this word of wisdom.
Oh yeah, I know what you're referring to now. So let's go look at that. I forgot about that one. But yeah.
And I, the Lord, give unto them a promise. Okay. Well, I'm going to start up here. All the saints who remember to keep and do these sayings, walking in obedience to the commandments, shall receive health in their navel and marrow to their bones, and shall find wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures, and shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not faint. This is reference to Isaiah here.
Well,
the
also
Lord
just the run and not be faint. That's being haste, getting ready to go.
Yep.
Just like in
Yep.
Passover.
This is
Right.
reference to Passover in Isaiah. This is a reference to our deliverance all over it, by obedience to the commandments and taking care of ourselves. And I, the Lord, give unto them a promise that the destroying angel shall pass by them as the children of Israel and not slay them.
Yeah, that's completely passive. In fact, even in obedience to the commandments, I think that's partly why we have unleavened bread, to let go of the false tradition so that we can then start accepting the true way, right?
The true leaven.
Yeah, the pure leaven. Because the kingdom of heaven is likened unto 3 measures of leaven.
Yep.
So anyways, yeah, very good connection there. Yes, I forgot about that. So thank you for reminding me. It's hard to remember everything. Thanks.
Well, I tend to make connections when there are blessings and promises that are involved.
Sure. Who doesn't want those
Which
connections?
means that my prayers can actually get pretty long because I remember a lot of the Lord's promises.
Yeah.
Remember that you promised this. this and that.
Yeah. Well, actually, you're supposed to pray for the promises. Is what you're supposed to pray. You're not supposed to wish for what you want. You're supposed to pray for the promises that he gives us. In the
And that's
scripture.
it. And that's it. You
Yeah.
pray. You pray to receive that which is promised to those who are obedient.
Right. Which means you live in obedience also, which so let's just do one small sidetrack on that. What's this one? I'll do this one. This one's the shortest one. Proverbs 28:9. He that turneth away his ear from hearing Torah, even his prayer shall be an abomination. So that's enough on that one. Okay, so was it? I forget what verse we just read. Sorry.
I
And it
think
just read 23.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
just did 23.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. We just read 23. Okay, let's do 24. Cassidy.
and ye shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever.
There it is again. Oh, forever. That's
Oh,
twice
but it
now.
has that space there though. I mean, that space is the time of the Gentiles.
Okay, it's that. Yeah, there it. God, Steve, no.
It's in the fine print in the space. Can't you see it? I can't. Oh, wait a minute. I'm gonna be Jeremiah 16:19. Just because I'm being a dork. O Yahweh, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in the day of affliction, the Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth and shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there is no profit. Anyways,
Oh, my
I'm
word.
being funny, but don't do the ways of the Gentiles. That's all throughout the law. Okay.
Well,
enough
and
with
yet,
that.
and yet, we want to have Gentiles-based salvation.
Well, that's because they're not saved. Anyways.
But they want to be.
Yeah, but
At least the desire to be saved is there. Just not enough desire to actually do it.
Well, yeah, you got to start somewhere, right? I mean, we both have grown in Yahweh and have both done things incorrectly. I know I have, and so.
Oh, I've done
it starts
terrible
somewhere.
things.
Yeah. So
I've done terrible things.
this is where we need to be missionaries and help others come learn the right way, because a lot of people
Yeah.
don't know any better, and if it wasn't for people speaking out, a lot of people just wouldn't know any better, right? That's what prophets do. Prophets don't go tell you everything's okay. They actually preach repentance as taught in Alma 13, but I don't want to sidetrack on that right now.
Yeah, but let's get on to 25.
Okay. Kesley, will you read 25?
And it came to pass when ye become to the land which Yahweh will give you, according as Yahweh hath promised, that ye shall keep this service.
So basically, keep doing this ordinance. Keep doing Passover is what that's saying.
Yeah.
So I do believe, now this specifically on the surface is talking about when they inherited Canaan, right? Which is now Jerusalem, East Israel. I also believe this tells us that we're going to keep Passover in heaven personally. No.
But what I definitely see in this is that they will keep Passover in Zion.
Yes. Yes. In the millennium, in fact, there's verses about that, like keeping the high holidays during the millennium, specifically tabernacles. But anyways, we're focused on Passover right now. But the land very often is symbolic of heaven. And if we get into heaven and we shall keep this, in fact, Joseph Smith has a quote. Let me get it real quick that I think applies to this. Let me get the picture form or the little meme I have. I mean, this world today loves memes, right? Let me get it up. This is another reason why I think we'll be keeping it in heaven. I can let me get a little bigger. Every principle proceeding from Elohim is eternal, and any principle which is not eternal is of the devil. So,
Oh yes, but principle doesn't mean truth. Anyway.
I think you're playing devil's advocate right now.
No, actually, I'm remembering an argument that a dipstick was having with you.
Well, I've had a lot of arguments, so I'm not sure which one for sure, but I don't want to sidetrack on that.
I'm not. I can't actually remember the name, so I can't help you with that. But I remember the argument. I was like, this is like the craziest thing to be arguing and splitting hairs over.
Well, I've had a lot of arguments, and a lot of people. I'm generally pretty good at bringing out quotes and scriptures for things where other people just want to argue their own logic. But anyways, I that's a sidetrack, and I don't want to go there.
Yeah. You should keep this service,
So
even when you
25. So I think we're on 26 now. Kesley, will you read that one?
Yeah. And it shall come to pass when your children shall say unto you, what mean ye by this service?
So why are we doing Passover? And this is another occurrence where this is where we talk about it, right? And the meaning behind it.
Yep.
Not just the history, but look, what mean ye by this? Why did it happen? What does it represent? What are we supposed to learn from it, right?
Mhm.
Which hopefully we're kind of bringing out here what we're supposed to learn from Passover and what it points to. And it points to the deliverance that the Messiah provides, physical and spiritual, and in some cases temporal, right?
Mhm.
Anyways, okay, verse 27.
That ye shall say, it is the sacrifice of Yahweh's Passover, who Yahweh passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed the head and worshipped.
So, to me, it is the sacrifice of Yahweh Passover. It is because of what he did on Passover much later at the end of his mortal ministry that made this possible.
Yeah.
Including this one. Because if it was not the power that he gained from actually keeping the law, he wouldn't have been able to do it back then. But it is the sacrifice of Yahweh's Passover.
And well, this is why in the scriptures it references, and just in connection to that, there is a reference, and there is when Satan asks for God's power, he says, "Wherefore give me thine honor." God's power is in his honor.
Right. And the honor comes from keeping the law. For why would you honor someone who just randomly does something? You don't give honor to people like that. You give honor to people who are consistent and are reliable and do things according to their word. In which Yahweh's word is the law, right? He's the one that gave it to us. In fact, he wrote it with his finger even, right?
There's beautiful imagery throughout the scriptures, such as such as milk, the idea of milk flowing from Yahweh's breast. The milk is the commandments. The law comes from the bosom of Yahweh.
Correct. Exactly.
Um,
And just on the 10 Commandments, the high holiday, Passover, this one that we're talking about, is an expounding of the Sabbath. Because there's 3 types of Sabbaths. There's the weekly Sabbath, the moonly Sabbath, and the annual Sabbath, which Passover is part of the annual Sabbath, yearly Sabbath, right? So, anyways, this is all possible because of Yahweh's personal sacrifice. And because of that, he was able to pass over the children of Israel, because Yahweh passes over those who take upon Yahweh's righteousness, right? Because our own righteousness are as menstrual rags, as in they're worth nothing, right? It's the period rags, to make it more blunt,
Yep.
of a woman, and nobody wants that, right? Even the woman doesn't. I don't know, Kesley, do you like to keep those?
Nope.
Throw those away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, it's because of his righteousness that we are passed over when we accept him, his authority, and his character, and start to imitate, follow him. When
we
Sorry, go ahead.
take his character upon us, and we are
Back-
found in his house.
One thought I just had today, it goes along with character. When we pray in his name, that's also saying when we pray in his character, as in when we pray for something that is in accordance to his character, he'll give it to us, as in according to his promises, right? It's not just we have this wish and we want it. We don't get those. It's according to his character, which is a meaning behind name. Even in the 1828 English dictionary, but that is even true even with Hebrew idioms. It's about his character in those prayers. But anyways, I just brought it up since it went along with what been said. And here he smote the Egyptians. So just like those sons of perditions will be smitten, right? And those who are in the telestial kingdom will be crushed, right? Or not telestial kingdom, but telestial glory. Sorry, that's still a bad habit. I try to break, but it comes through occasionally. It takes a while to get rid of that completely. But anyways, but those who accept him are delivered or passed over, hence Passover, right? And the people bowed their head and worshiped. So because of this great work, that's why we worship Yahweh, Yeshua, is because he saved us. That is why we worship him, because of this great work of his personal sacrifice that will happen on Passover. Anyways, I don't know if anybody wants to add anything.
Nope. Let's move on.
Okay, Kesley, you'll read 28.
And the children of Israel went away and did as Yahweh had commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they.
So the big thing that I would say, did, not just believed. They did it.
Well, the interesting thing is as I was looking through Strong's at Hebrews chapter 3 and 4,
Do you want me to go
every
get
time
those?
every time the word unbelief is mentioned, the word that is there can be, go ahead and pull it up. But every time the word unbelief is mentioned, the Greek word that is translated to us as unbelief could also mean disobedience.
That's insightful, right? And that
Yep.
completely makes sense.
So,
to me.
so belief and obedience, true belief is always coupled with obedience.
Yeah.
Because
And so,
we don't even have enough to have faith on without acting on the belief.
well, I think a problem is in the Hellenistic world, belief is different in Hellenistic thought than it is in Hebrew thought. And I think that's
Yeah.
where that kind of comes into play there.
Wherefore harden not your hearts as in the provocation in the days of temptation in the wilderness. Okay. Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief. This word, you can click on that and you can see that the Greek word behind it.
Well, here it's
Stiff.
negative.
Oh, okay, but there's another place where the word unbelief is. But
It's
you-
also unbelief. Or no,
well,
the
okay.
unbelief, and the other one is stiff-neckedness. If you feel it's important enough, we can go to the Hebrew real quick. Or
Let's go to the
this would be the
Strong.
Greek.
Let's go to Strong's. Let's go to Strong's, because I'm pretty sure because I do believe that it might have been in Hebrews 4 that they actually had that word. The Greek means disobedience as well, but this is
Well, we can sidetrack on this because this doing is an important part, right?
Hebrews. Hebrews.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk and find it at the same time, where the gospel is a gospel of becoming, not a gospel of just knowing, as in Greek
Learning,
or
grading all, getting all
learning's
kinds
probably
of
a better, yeah, forever learning and never coming to the truth, right?
Let's
It's being a little slow, so we'll start with 12. Oh, this is the interlinear, but anyways, that's fine.
unbelief of unbelief, apistias,
This unfaithfulness, distrust,
unfaithfulness.
faithlessness. That's not doing, which is another word for unfaithful, because faithful has to be like an unfaithful wife is one that goes cheating on you, or an unfaithful
Yeah.
husband is when it goes cheating. It breaks the covenant, and the covenant is the law, right?
Yep,
Look at this one.
exactly. So
Same thing, right? So
yeah,
we can go 19.
yeah. Let's go to 19.
Unbelief. This looks like the exact same. Unbelief.
Christian. Yep.
It's the same thing.
A very different variation on the same word. And let's go to chapter 4,
Okay.
because there's a lot of stuff in there a lot of stuff in chapter 4 about unbelief, as they're
Sure.
setting up why it is that we observe the Sabbath.
So
Seeing therefore that it remaineth that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached entered not in because of unbelief. What is that?
okay, so 6 and 11, I'll just read 11 real quick. Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, meaning heaven, right? Lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. So let's go look at the Greek now.
Unbelief is disobedience, or at least it is evidenced in our disobedience.
Yes, I would call it more evidence of the disbelief. 6.
Those who look for reasons not to believe and those who look for reasons not to obey are showing their unbelief.
Well, here,
Disobedience, straight up.
Yeah.
The Pathian, the word for unbelief,
unbelief,
is disobedience.
Disobedience. So here, Hebrews 4:6 is completely unbelief is breaking the law. So that's
Unbelief is disobedience is unbelief.
Let's go look at 11.
See, that's the thing, is you have to look at the New Testament. You have to let the Old Testament show you how you should look at the New Testament.
Completely. Yes.
Of disobedience.
So 11, It's also disobedience. Yeah.
Unbelief and disobedience are synonymous.
Yes, in a lot of cases, right? I wouldn't say every single one, but this is where, as far as it's translated correctly, definitely plays into it, right? So,
And definitely, and definitely what I will, and definitely what I can say and stand behind is that if you are looking for a reason not to obey a law, it is because you are taking shelter underneath the veil of unbelief rather than rending it.
yeah, and Isaiah 8 says it's because there's no light in you.
By the way, just the veil of unbelief and the natural man are also synonymous.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
They're also synonymous.
So one other thing I want to bring out from verse 28, this commandment came through a prophet. And in fact, in this case, a mighty one. Moses is a mighty and strong one.
You mean they went and did as the? You mean they didn't wait for the Lord Himself to tell them that Moses was His servant?
Well, they already knew.
Yeah. No,
but
I'm just addressing this whole thing. I only follow the Lord. Men suck.
Yeah. Well, this is why I'm bringing this out. It was commanded through Moses. And guess what? If you didn't believe what Moses said because you said you can go to Yahweh yourself, guess what? Your household would have gotten the angel of destruction upon it. Yahweh uses leadership and prophets to tell us what to do. And here's Moses, the mighty and strong one, in his day, and his assistant, his mouth, Aaron, right? Anyways, that's getting another subject, but this was given to us through a prophet. This is not something that Yahweh went and told himself to each individual household or even the whole congregation. This came through a prophet, through a leader that Yahweh designated. Leaders are
gave
important.
priesthood, and gave priesthood too. So priesthood's a thing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, anyways, I'm not going to go there right now.
We're sidetracking. But we're sidetracking.
So no,
beat
that's
me with
fine.
a stick.
No, I do it too. I'm just trying to stay a little more focused because we still actually have a lot more stuff to go over. In fact, maybe we might skip some of the others and go to Deuteronomy 8:16 because there's some stuff in that one I do. Oh, I even want Leviticus 23, or
yeah, let's do Leviticus 23.
Well, let's finish 12.
I'll just go through and read this here.
Well, I don't want to go too fast because I think we should still talk about it.
Okay. And the Lord Yahweh said unto Moses, Aaron, this is ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger eat thereof. No stranger eat thereof. So, only Israel. Well,
not just Israel. It's those who have accepted Yahweh.
Yeah, those who've entered into the covenant.
Right. The strangers that entered in the covenant, which I think goes along with the baptism of fire. You've been accepted into His church, right? Those are the ones who are to go partake of this. Okay. As we talked about some earlier. And so I think that's enough on that one.
But every man's servant that is bought for money, when thou hast circumcised him, then shall he eat thereof. It looks like there's something.
Yeah, I do have some notes down here. So on this, because I have it here just so we can look into it more, because this one can be a little more tricky one, but there's a verse in the Book of Mormon, which it gets from Isaiah, if I remember correctly, come by salvation without money and without price. Okay. I do believe this wording references that, because a servant bought for money, I do believe references that. And a servant, anybody who accepts Yahweh, becomes Yahweh's servant. Now,
Mhm.
some are in more fully of that role than others, but the fact even how the whole congregation, including the women, are supposed to wear tzitzit, the tassels, shows that they are priests unto Yahweh in a certain aspect. Not, I mean, there are priests that have special duties for them, especially Levites and Melchizedek, okay? But the whole household of Israel and those who come into Yahweh's house, or accept him, do become priests to a certain degree of some sort,
Yeah.
and that's a servant.
The tzitzit is a symbol of authority.
Yeah, it's a symbol that you have priesthood and that you're a servant. And Torah gets into that some, but anyways, but that's what Yahweh's servants are. And guess what? He bought us.
With his blood.
Yes, with his blood, not with money. Right? Come by salvation without money and without price. Salvation is bought with accepting Yeshua's blood that he spilled for us, right? So I believe that's what that's referring to, because that one can be a little
and then we
complicated.
can also reference back to Paul for the circumcision. Our circumcision is within. It's the circumcision of the spirit.
Yes, and so this one gets tricky, and I haven't fully worked this out, but to circumcise, and we can, I don't want to spend too much time with this, and I can put the link in, but when you go look at here, the actual Hebrew word behind it, and we can maybe just peruse it real quickly. It doesn't always only apply to men. Shall surely, look at that. Circumcised, not circumcised. Sometimes it's to the flesh. When it's of the flesh, that's definitely going to be men, but also it has to be circumcisions of heart, and not just the foreskin. And so my theory here that I haven't fully worked out here, and I have a few notes on this, is that I wonder if the circumcision that it's talking about here is of the heart and not of the foreskin. Okay. But this is something I have not fully, completely got everything out on it. But it is like 376. Where of man. When you go look at the Hebrew behind that, sometimes it is applied to women. And so this is where translator bias, we have to really be careful with.
Well, the thing is that with the Hebraic form for man can always include women, but the Hebraic form for women, the Hebraic word for women, never includes men.
Directly, because women can include can be a church, so symbolically it can include man, but but in pretty much in every language I'm aware of, when it's inclusive of male and female, they use the male term, right? They never use female to include both, unless it's symbolically with the church that it's both, right? But anyways, so some of the times that word is used, it refers to women, and this is where you got to be careful with translator bias, because I think some translator biases are honest mistakes, and some are done on purpose.
Well, the other thing that's important to remember here is that circumcision is no more, but the holiday is. So what circumcision are we now referring to? Since
Correct.
there is no more physical circumcision. We
Right,
are
which
now
is
referring.
another reason why I tend to lean to circumcision of the heart, because for this to still be valid, it'd have to be of the heart and not.
It is, and that's
Forced,
exactly what it is.
Um,
And that's exactly what it is.
but the reason I've tried to fill this out a little bit, I still need to be more on, is because in the Hebrew roots movement, they think you actually have to get the foreskin, which a careful read of the New Testament actually shows that that's been done away with. But with the Book of Mormon, Moroni 8, and in the D&C, I forget the section in the D&C that tells us this. D&C 74 tells us it's done away, and JST Genesis 17 tells us it's done away with also. And it also tells us it's to point to being baptized when you're 8, according
Right.
to Genesis 17. But anyways, we're sidetracking. So
We're sidetracking in a major way.
yeah.
Hell,
anyways.
where was the narrative?
But that one, it did relate, right? And I'm trying to bring
Yeah.
out why I believe it's heart and not foreskin. So,
Mhm.
but
Okay, so when we,
one's a tricky
so
one.
at this point, yeah, a foreigner and a hired servant shall not eat thereof. So basically, somebody who is a non-believer who does not have a circumcised heart,
Yeah,
who has
a
not
hired
been purchased
servant.
in the blood of Yeshua.
Right, because up here, this is basically, depending how you want to read it, that's a hired servant, right? Because he's bought for money. That's hired.
Mhm.
This one is a non-believer. Okay.
In one house shall it, yep. In one house shall it be eaten. Thou shalt not carry forth out of the flesh abroad out of the house, neither shall ye break a bone thereof.
So this is goes along with how you can't leave the house till
You can't
morning.
leave
right?
Yahweh's house. You
Well,
cannot leave Yahweh's house.
Yeah, you have to endure to the end for the spiritual aspect, because we know everything is spiritual before it is temporal, right? And we can look at verses, but I don't want to sidetrack on that. But part of the reason you can't take it out from one house to another is you have to accept it yourself and do it yourself. Just like the 10 virgins, 5 foolish ones were trying to get the oil from the 5 wise ones. You can't do that. You have to partake of Yeshua yourself and do the roasting, aka have your own baptism of fire, right?
Yep.
It's
All
something
the
you have to do yourself.
congregation, absolutely. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. This is who keeps it, those of the covenant. Oh,
Okay. Zach has a comment.
Oh. Also about the not breaking a bone. It's like also has to do with Yeshua on the cross.
Yes, it does.
He didn't have his bones broken.
Correct. It also has to do with not breaking a law, but especially in the physical fulfillment with Yeshua's mortal ministry, he did not have a bone broken. So yes, I meant to bring that out, but we started going a little too fast and forgot. So it's good that you brought that up.
You know, I'm just trying to figure out how to make sure that we get Leviticus and Deuteronomy.
Yeah, we're just gonna have to keep going. But anyways, let's just. Okay, so thank you for that, Zach. 48.
And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee and will keep the Passover of the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. And the circumcision is one of the heart.
Yeah, and so I have notes for verse 48 on this also, same type of deal going on. Like where it says male, it can be females. Come near, I mean, that's not a big deal. Now, his actually, let's see, Where'd it go? One of these
Here.
words where they translate it as his, it actually, they don't have anything for it. That is completely translator bias because they have no source for translating it that way.
Mhm.
No, I'm having a hard time seeing it.
Here.
Oh, right there,
Right.
right there.
There's absolutely
There's nothing. And when I actually click on this one, it goes nowhere. And they don't
Yep.
have that one up there. That's completely translator bias. 191 is the fallout. So the one that they have circumcised, they have two different definitions, one being uncircumcised and one having to do with actual foreskin. Two separate definitions for the same word, giving support that it can be circumcision of the heart. Okay. Also here, this is interesting. That same word is translated as unskilled or uncircumcised of the heart, or translates as forbidden also. So that same word, different contexts, translated differently. So this is where we need to look deeper into things and also take correct theology into account, because translators put their theological biases into their translations, for good or bad, right?
Yep.
Um,
So 48, but still 48, the whole thing is anybody can partake of the Passover of the Lord as long as they be circumcised apart and have entered into the covenant.
correct. That is how I read that also. And I just showed some research that I've done actually to help support that from the actual Hebrew behind it, right?
Yep, exactly.
Which I still want to fill out some more, but I didn't have time to do everything I wanted. Anyways.
And here is the kicker right here. One law shall be to him that is homeborn and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. One law for Israel, one law for the Gentiles. Gentiles, get round it.
Well, I mean, even the Jews need to get on board with the law, because most Jews follow the oral law more than the written law. But so it's not just the
But still,
Gentiles that have the problem.
The point is, most of the people who want to bust my balls on it are Gentiles. Gentiles, get round it.
Correct. Jews will approach it a different route on that issue. But, yes. But the Gentiles just complete all-out deny it, where Jews will add it, which makes it null and void, right? But anyways,
Right.
Like we talked about one, even just with their Seders, right?
Exactly. Thus did all the children of Israel, as the Lord Yahweh commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they.
Oh, wait a minute. Look, it was through the prophets, right? Anyways, we already went over that. This is just
we rehashed that one already.
Yep.
It came to pass that the self same day that the Lord Yahweh did bring the children of, or Yehovah, however you want to say it, did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies.
Yeah, in fact, it's not stated here, but I mean, this has to do with the roaring lions and for Nephi, was it 21, 22-ish area, how they'll take things from the Gentiles. Same thing happened. I mean, it's not in this verse, and it's in a different one, but this reminds me of it, how when the Israelites left, the Israelites gave them riches for their services.
Yep.
Which is somewhat related to this, but it's a little different. But I think the main thing to bring out of here is when we accept Yahweh and his lamb, which is Yeshua, he'll take us out of Egypt, out of the world, and save us, right? Redeem us. Anyways. So that's everything in Exodus 12. So Leviticus 23 is short that I have. In fact, it's a one-liner. I'll read this one. In the 14th day of the first month is the at eve, so this is, this is when it starts in the evening, is Yahweh's Passover. That's all it really states that in that chapter. That's a
So
short
does
one.
that mean that you hold the dinner starting at like 6 or something like that?
Yeah, sunset is what I would take that as.
Okay.
Or
Here the sunset's getting pretty late over here. So you're talking like 8:30.
yeah. Well, anyways, I would do sunset, and you killed the lamb before that. But anyways, we went over that already. So Numbers 9 also goes over it, and it has a little more. Is Matt there, and would he like to read some?
Yeah.
I would love for Matt to read some. I'm gonna stand up, take a step off.
All right. Which one? First one?
Yeah, we'll start with one.
That one. Okay. And the Lord Yahweh spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying.
Okay, stop right there. So, a couple things. So they did it again, right? This is after they actually left Egypt, and guess who Yahweh used to tell them to do it? It was the leadership, and in this specific case, it was a prophet, Moses, right?
You're kidding.
And guess what? Look, it happened at the exact same time. 14th
What?
day of
No,
the
just-
first moon. Oh, yeah, it's funny how he's
It's the
consistent.
second observance. It's the second year, basically.
Yeah, it's the second year. But anyways,
Second,
Okay.
yeah. Second cycle. Let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season.
okay, so the believers, according to his Moedim, which is done by the sun and the moon, which goes back to Genesis 1:14, right?
Yeah.
The appointed seasons, the same word behind it, which talks about the sun and the moon. It looks like Zach has something he wants to say.
So
Yes, Zach.
in this version of the Bible I have, which is the New Revised Standard Version,
Okay,
it says in the verse 2, it says appointed time.
sure.
Instead of-
That's more what
Yeah.
I think that's a better translation of Moedim than season, but because a lot of times, especially with our Western mind, we think season as in spring, summer, fall, and winter. But I think appointed time is a better translation. But the Hebrew behind it is the same. It's just translator bias or whatever. But anyways, but that's a good thing to bring out, appointed time. And I think that's a better translation.
Yep.
Okay, Matt.
Ready?
Agree? Yeah.
In the 14th day of this month at even ye shall keep it in his appointed season, according to all the rites of it, and according to all the ceremonies thereof shall ye keep it.
Which that's referring to a lot to what we just read out of Exodus 12. There's some parts that we'll get in other places, like Numbers 28 and Deuteronomy 16 in a bit, but there's bits and pieces sprinkled around, but I think the majority of it is in Exodus 12 when it first time happened. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
The comment.
Okay, and
on that verse, it says instead of evening or even at even, it says at twilight.
Yeah, there, even in the King James, they'll translate that same word twilight sometimes, but I mean twilight's at sunset, so I don't see that as a big deal, but it is. Some people will read into that as slightly different times, and I've run across people on that actually. But even the King James will translate twilight sometimes and on that word, these words. But anyways,
you
this
mean
is
we're gonna
where
have to
we have
become
to, huh?
bad joke.
Oh, okay. This is just where these Hebrew tools make it help us to better understand things than the translator biases, right? Anyways. Okay.
You
Matt.
ready?
Yeah.
And Moses spake unto the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover
And they
So
kept the
it's a com-
Passover on the
Wait, wait, wait. I
14th
just want to say
day.
it's a commandment. That's a lot of what that says, right? That's a commandment.
Yes.
And it's
Finishing the idea. It's basically finishing the idea of the first 3 verses.
Sure.
It's a command.
And it's part
First
of
5.
the Sabbath. It's the annual Sabbath.
Yes.
5.
And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at even in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord Yahweh commanded Moses, so did the children of Israel.
So a lot of, while they're in the wilderness and they through their prophet leader Moses, right? Which we've gone over those points already.
Well, and also we can actually apply this to us because right now we're in the wilderness.
Very good point. We're in the wilderness right now.
We are very much in the
And
wilderness.
we have to live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of our prophet. As of right now, that would be Yeshua.
Sure. Well, he's always been the prophet, but we've had other ones like Joseph Smith, right? But Joseph Smith didn't restore everything.
But right now, Yeshua is the one that. Right now, Yeshua is the one that we can recognize.
Sure. But even Joseph Smith didn't restore everything, as stated. First Nephi 13 or 14. I always forget.
1334.
Okay.
First
Anyway.
Nephi 1334.
I have a post on that. Shameless plug. Anyways,
Yeah,
but yes, that was good to bring out. Thank you.
I've cited that one in thousands of answers.
Six. Yes. And there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day, and they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day.
Okay, so I have an idea what this could represent. I don't know if it completely is, but it's basically, and we'll keep reading a little bit, it's that they can then do it a moon later, okay? Now, the one thing that I wonder about when we go look at DNC 76, okay? And the Terrestrial people, there is a statement in there that I think somewhat relates to that, and I'll tell you why. Because a dead body.
Did you want Terrestrial or Terrestrial?
Terrestrial. I might have said the wrong thing. I wanted Terrestrial, but
Okay.
Terrestrial has a thing about how they didn't have a testimony of Yeshua while in the flesh, but afterwards they received it, and they didn't because they were dead. Spiritually, they were dead. I mean, the Celestial people who are, kind of keep the law and kind of don't. They do what's convenient rather than doing it completely. And that's kind of what I see in that group that just happened. They kind of did things so that they couldn't keep the law completely, but they later did keep it. And this is my wondering, this group of people where they kept the Passover in the second moon, I wonder if it's the terrestrial people, and those who keep it when it's supposed to is the celestial people. It is my inclination of a deeper meaning behind these verses. And just the wording of it, I think, matches. And the general intent of their descriptions, right? Because they didn't have the testimony of Yeshua in the flesh, but afterwards received it. They were honorable men on the earth who were blinded by the craftiness of men. So they tried to be good, but they didn't do everything correct.
Right.
Which sounds like, to some degree, this group of men who touch dead bodies, and dead bodies represents sin. That's my inclination. What this represents behind the scenes is what's going on. But
the deeper meaning behind the obvious historical narrative.
Yes, yeah. And there it might be something else, but to me, there's multiple connections to DNC 76 and the terrestrial connections. I mean, we could even.
No, I can see that. I can see it.
We could even do it with the parable of the sower. That one's going to be number 3, right?
Mhm.
This one's not so fold out, but fell among the thorns, and the thorns sprung out and choked them. So they liked it. It started growing, but they didn't really completely do it. Again, it's going to be the threes. He also received the seed among the thorns. He is that heareth the word, and the cares of the world and deceitfulness of riches choked the word, and they became unfruitful. To me, it sounds the same type of group.
Yeah.
So we could go look about it in about the resurrections in 1 Corinthians. This one, I don't have them numbered.
For as in Adam all die. Oh no.
No, so this is celestial. Oh, here's the terrestrial, right
yeah,
there.
that's
But afterwards,
yeah.
they that are Christ at his coming. So this is afterwards, like the second time afterwards, later. And that also fits the terrestrial, right? And this is in 1 Corinthians 15. So anyways, that's probably enough matching unless we want to do a little more.
I'm
But I think
sidetracking
that's
on
pretty
that.
good. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Depends on sports now. He can take.
Okay. So dead body. Okay, I think that's the one we just read. So now we're on 7. But hopefully, as we read through this, we can hopefully I've showed enough to help other people make connections that I made on it. That these are the terrestrial people that's being talked about. This little side subject in the history.
And those men said unto him, we are defiled by the dead body of a man, wherefore are we kept back, that we may not offer an offering of Yahweh in his appointed season among the children of Israel.
And this could even go back to this 5 wise versions and the 5 unwise, right? Because the 5 unwise weren't keeping the ones that have to do with the Sabbaths, which include the annual ones, because the 5 have to do with our relationship. The wise 5 have to do with keeping with our neighbors, but in addition to those with Yahweh. And that's here, they didn't do that, right? For whatever reason, they didn't do it at their appointed time.
Well, what he's saying, and they're asking, why are we held back? Just because we touched the body of a dead man. Why are we being held back because of this?
Right, but I think the symbolic, I'm going more with the symbolic nature or the spiritual nature behind it, is that death has to do with sin, and they touched something that was sinful, and which made them so they couldn't have it at the first time, right? And so they weren't keeping, and they knew the law, but they did it anyways. Just like the terrestrial people, they knew the law, but they just weren't diligent in keeping it, which is exactly what happened here. Okay,
and Moses said unto them, stand still, and I will hear what Yahweh will command concerning you.
So here's another example through the prophets' leaders. Right.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, and the Lord spake unto Moses.
Yeah, saying, unto Moses, the leader. Anyways.
Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if any man of your or of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey afar off, yet he shall keep the Passover unto Yahweh. The 14th day of the second month at even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs.
So this is where
none of it.
They did it later, right? Which I think goes along with
and therefore, second month, second resurrection, second.
Yeah. Okay, go
ahead. They shall leave none of it until the morning, nor break any bone of it. According to all the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep it. But the man that is clean and is not in a journey, and forbeareth to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people. And because he brought not the offering of Yahweh in his appointed season, that man shall bear his sin.
So this would be talking about the sons of perditions, right? They just They completely rejected it, just like completely rejecting Yahweh, which is where the law, right? This is where the sons of perditions go.
And if a stranger shall sojourn among you and will keep the Passover unto Yahweh, according to the ordinance of the Passover and according to the manner thereof, so shall he do. Ye shall have one ordinance both for the stranger, one ordinance both for the stranger, one ordinance both for the stranger, and for him that was born in the land.
So the stranger is someone who was not of Israel, but then joined Israel, right? Who was not a believer and who is now a believer, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I think that's
So,
enough.
so the point is that if we want to be considered believers, we have to start looking at this stuff.
Right.
We have to believe what?
Yeah, we have to start looking at this stuff with an eye to keeping it. Because if we don't, we're not believers. You don't really believe in Yeshua. You don't really because you don't believe in Yahweh.
Well,
you don't believe in Yahweh, you don't believe in Yeshua.
So on that point, if you hate what comes out of Yahweh's mouth, can you really love Yahweh? No.
Not at all.
Because if you don't like who someone is and what they teach, you really don't like that person. Because that's who they are, is what they're teaching and what's coming out of their mouth, right?
Well,
And what they're doing, right?
Look at
Because Yeshua kept it.
Pharisees.
Yep, that's right.
I
And if
didn't
it's
hear
good
him.
enough for Yeshua, probably. What's that?
Well, I didn't hear Matt.
I said, look at the Pharisees. They're a perfect example.
But all I'm saying is that this law was good enough for Yeshua. It's good enough for you.
Nah, you're kidding. Nah, that's
Yeah.
nah. See, because we're holier than Yeshua apparently.
So
I
this
guess
one's
that's what it means.
pretty short, Numbers 28:16, and this is intermingled with the law of Moses, but this is the only one that's like real specific to the Passover per se. I mean, there's a few more, but this is the one I brought out. And in the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of Yahweh. Okay, so that one's there's really not much to say there. So Deuteronomy 16 is there's more in here and we can look at later, but this is the one I think is a little more confusing. And I think also this is one that gets twisted why they'll say the Levites need to do it at the temple. And this is because it has so part of the law of Moses is doing extra sacrifices for the law of Moses on specific days, including Passover, which this one leads into, but I didn't copy everything over. But anyways, but as we read through this, hopefully it'll become more obvious. Zach, you want to take another turn reading? So verse 1.
Observe the month of Abib. Is that how you say it? Abib.
Abib. That's how I say
Abib.
it.
Abib.
Abib.
Yeah, this is where they're doing, most Hebrews will do a hard B, which is more like a V. I mean, this happens in Spanish too, but anyways.
Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover unto Yahweh thy Elohim. For in the month of Abib, Yahweh thy Elohim brought thee out of Egypt by night.
So on this point, Abib means fresh or young. It's not dealing with the ripeness of barley. Okay, for example, even here it's bringing out when Yahweh brought them out. Just before Yahweh brought them out, barley was destroyed. Okay, we can go get the verse if you want, but I'd rather not sidetrack because we're taking longer than I actually should be, but I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep plugging on.
But anyways, this does not have to do with barley, which a lot of people will claim has to do with the fresh month or the young month. And you can see that here. In fact, sometimes it's translated ear, but or fresh. But anyways, okay. 2.
Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto Yahweh thy Elohim of the flock and the herd in the place which Yahweh shall choose to place his name there.
Okay, so this is where I believe, and I think if we talk it through some, this is where it's intermediating the portions of the law of Moses that are supposed to happen on Passover. Okay, so flock, and we can look at this in the dictionary. In fact, maybe we should go to Bible Hub here to even get to that.
I think that'll be it. I think Bible Hub is one of my favorite resources.
Yeah. Well, I think this one's an important one to do it on, where some are more important than others, right?
Absolutely.
This one, especially since I'm bringing something out I've never heard anybody state, okay? But from my own studies, and I would say inspiration from Yahweh, this makes sense, okay? Verse 2. In fact, I'll bring this out later, but here it's interesting. The Berean Study Bible reverses the order of herd and flock. I mean, that's not a big deal, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
And I think this should be and not or, and we'll get into that as we go through this. But herd, okay? That's cattle or an ox. So generally speaking, when people think of Passover, they think lamb, obviously, right? But when you start looking at what the extra sacrifices that the law of Moses required for that day. In fact, let's hopefully Numbers 28 is the right one for this, but because there's 3 main chapters in Torah for the law of Moses. Hopefully Numbers 28 is a good one. If not, we can look at the other ones. I'm just trying to hopefully do this part.
But 28, but Numbers 28 is a really good one for the law of Moses.
Yeah, it's one of them. There's a couple of them, right? Let's see, 16. So 16.
I think there's even one in Exodus that's really good for that too.
Yes, there is, and there's one in Leviticus also. But
yeah.
Okay, Passover, the goats, 15th day of this month. You should be holy. So this one's talking about the 15th. But here, here's an example, okay? This is probably not the best one, but just to bring out the example here. Here on the 15th, you're supposed to do, this is law of Moses right here, 2 young bullocks and a ram and 7 lambs of the first year. They shall be unto you without blemish. Their meat offering, okay. So this one's not a good one for Passover one. Let me see. Oh, I probably should have not have done that. Let me move this over just so I can see my other notes for the other chapters. Hold on. So Exodus 29, let's go look there. That's another law of Moses one. So the main point I'm trying to bring out is this herd is law of Moses stuff. And I'm not the most prepared, but I'm trying to see if we can actually find it. So it's going to be probably after 42. Burnt offering, there's meat with children. Aaron, no, okay, so let's go Leviticus. This is where I wish I had more time to prepare.
Yeah, it happens.
Well, there's a lot of general stuff I have in mind. Sometimes in the specifics, I have to go find it, right?
You might have to do a search.
A lot meat offering, flour.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I have some other, maybe I can find it faster because they're first. Where are- Well, here, oh, I'm in the wrong spot. That's why I'm not seeing what I wanted. Sorry, guys. Maybe it's this one. Okay. Here we go. So here they kept the Passover, right? And here's the lamb. And Joshua gave to the people of flocks, lambs, a kid for the Passover offering. So look, here's they're adding additional things to the law of Moses. It's for Passover that's specified in the law that I'm having a hard time finding, but here's an example of it that I am finding quicker. Okay. And they were prepared to the number of 30,000 and 3,000 bullocks. That's a herd right there. That's law of Moses stuff.
Yeah.
These were of the king's substance. And the princes gave willingly unto the people, to the priests, and to the Levites, offerings of 2,600 small cattle, that's a herd, and 300 oxen, that's another herd, right? So this is law of Moses stuff right there, which is done away with.
Yep.
5,000 small cattle, 500 oxen. Anyways, you get the picture, right? That's probably
Yep, and they killed the Passover, and the priests sprinkled blood with their hands, and the Levites flayed them. You see, yep, the roasted Passover.
But
Well, the main thing is that this seems like this seems a little bit like excessive piety to me.
they may have Solomon, when they dedicated the temple.
Just not, this is
did
Josiah realizing that they haven't kept the law this whole time, and so he decides he must be trying to make it all up in 1 year.
Yeah, that could be what's going on. I don't know. Because
Which
that's a little
sounds like
excessive.
which sounds like the mistake of a young mind.
Yeah, which he was.
I can
But
make it up
anyways,
to you. I'm going to consult you with how I'm going to make it up to you, but I'm going to make it up to you.
but the main point I was trying to bring out is how law of Moses, which I didn't do the best at finding because I was trying to do it quick, but we saw it for some other holidays. It does state that extra things are done for the law of Moses for different high holidays, right?
I think that I think that a lot of Josiah's reforms are largely responsible for the fact for why even the Jews tie the law of Moses to Torah.
I don't have an opinion on that at this point, and I don't want to focus on it right now because we're almost done with just reading the scriptures, and then I might have to call it a night because I'm actually going longer than I'm supposed to, but I want to finish this.
Okay.
So what we're okay. So the small animals, and the large herd. So those goes along with the law of Moses stuff, which I did not do the best in demonstrating it because I'm not the most prepared. I was trying to get prepared with this stuff, but obviously you can see I was not completely. But in the place where Yahweh shall choose his place name to be there. Okay, so that is somewhere that Yahweh states that should happen. Okay. Now later in this passage, we're going to see that he says without the gates. That's different. Passover lamb is done without the gates. The extra animals for law of Moses is done at the temple. And this is where I believe that the Jews twist this passage to say that all the lambs for Passover had to be done at the temple, which is why they say it's the Levite priest doing it, which we went over before. That's not the case, right? In fact, just
Well,
summary, there's a
the
whole
thing
bunch of
is that
passages that show that. That's
Yep,
not the
and,
case.
but the whole thing is that the reason that exists is because Hezekiah made a law stating that all sacrifices were to be done at the temple, and that's in the Bible.
Okay, I don't doubt you. I don't know that verse, but he made some mistakes for sure. Probably in his zeal instead of his correct knowledge, right? Which that goes along with zeal without knowledge, right? But anyways, okay, so I think that's enough on that. So here, thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. So unleavened bread, 7 days thou shalt eat leavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction. I'm just reminding them how they were afflicted because of their sins. The reason you get afflicted is because of your sins. And here's the unleavened bread trying to remind them to let their sins go, right? Or the false teachings, which causes sins. Because false belief in themselves are not a sin. And Joseph Smith has a good quote on that. I don't want to go get it. But the problem with at least some false beliefs, they will cause you to sin. And there are a lot of those, especially in the New Testament. Yeshua stated that a lot of those false traditions make Torah null and void, aka they make you sin, right? Some false traditions don't do that, and some do. For thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste. So there's that fast again, and leaving the world behind, right? And do it fast. Don't do it slow. That thou mayest remember the day. So this is where we're supposed to remember when this happened, that thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life. Always remember why we left Egypt, right? Always. Not just for a while, but always.
I'll think about it for a minute.
Well, then you should only be alive for a minute then, Matt. Unless you want to break the law. Okay. 4. There shall be no leavened bread seen with thee in all thy coast 7 days. So this is talking about unleavened bread with it, because unleavened bread and Passover go together. Okay. Neither shall there anything of the flesh which thou sanctified in the first day at evening.
Sacrifice.
Yeah, so as remain until the morning. So this is talking about the lamb that was sacrificed. Okay.
Yep.
So this is
You must eat the flesh before
the Passover lamb, which there's other verses about, making sure you eat it before the day is over, just right there. And so that's just repeating that same commandment again. And we've already gone over some symbolism on that, so I'm not going to do that again. 5, thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within, in fact, I'm just going to put the lamb within any of thy gates, which Yahweh thy Elohim giveth thee. So the actual Passover lamb has to be slain outside the city, which, guess what? Yeshua was slain outside the city gates, according to the law, right?
Yep.
And at the place which Yahweh thy Elohim. So this is what. So this, before I forget,
this is the other reason why the Last Supper was not on Passover.
Well, this
The sacrifice had to happen on Passover.
Correct. Yes. On that point, yes. The sacrifice happened on Passover.
The sacrifice had to happen on Passover.
Right.
So anybody who says the Last Supper is on Passover is an idiot.
I wouldn't say an idiot. I would say they've clinged to false traditions, but hopefully after listening to this, they'll become wise with the knowledge of Torah to show that that's a false tradition. Because we all have, 2 Nephi 28 brings out how the sincere in heart will be taught false traditions from false teachers. Hopefully that's what they are. And now that they're learning from the actual law, that they'll correct their incorrect belief, right? But
Yeah, that's true.
so
I get a little
5,
carried away.
I do sometimes too. And so we got to keep each other in check as we do, right? Because you've kept me in check at times.
Yeah.
So, but here's without the gates in verse 5, and verse 2 with the place with his name there, and that's the temple. This is where I say this is mixing law of Moses and actual Passover together, because law of Moses has a component for Passover in it, and that's what's going on here,
Right.
which I was
Right.
not the most prepared into showing, but it's there. I'm running late as it is. Verse 6, but at the place which Yahweh thy Elohim shall choose to place his name in, there shall sacrifice the Passover at evening. So this is the law of Moses, Passover, and extra sacrifices at the going down of the sun, at the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt. So at this evening, I think a better translation would be between the evenings, because of when the lamb from the law of Moses, or the second lamb per day on the law of Moses, is sacrificed, and that is between the evenings when we go look at more specific law of Moses verses, which I'd rather not do right now because I'm past my budget on time as it is already. So in fact, maybe I will, just because that's important. Let's see if I can find it quickly, just to make that point. No, not this one. Am I spelling it wrong? Offer evening.
You're trying to spell the word evening?
Am I spelling it wrong?
Evening. Make sure you spell the whole word.
Well, no, but
maybe.
Eve, even. So that's.
I see.
Yes, the other lamb that shall offer it even.
This
I'll
one's
do it.
not showing between the evening, so I'm not going to spend any more time on that. It's there. As I'm told you, I'm already gone past what I was told I was allowed to do on time. Okay, so between the evenings, I think is a better translation of that. At the going down of the sun, at the season or the appointed time which thou camest forth out of Egypt, right? So that's referencing back to Exodus 12, 7. Thou shalt roast fire, as we talked about with baptism of fire, and eat it in the place which Yahweh thy Elohim shall choose, which is thy house, and thou shalt turn in the morning and go unto thy tent. So you're going to leave in the morning, which is what happened, because the tents, you're now going to go take your tents and leave in tabernacle in the wilderness, which is what we're going through right now. Did you want to add something?
Oh,
No,
no, I
no,
was
no,
just saying the tents or sukkos, I think.
Yeah,
Is that what he's talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
The sukkahs.
The sukkah. Yeah. Sorry, sukkah. The sukkah.
So, and then 8 goes along with leading into unleavened bread. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly to Yahweh thy Elohim, shall do no work therein. And so that would make it the 22nd, which on the lunar Sabbath is actually a Sabbath. So
Yep.
it
Right.
completely fits right in. So with that, I do think we read all the main verses in Torah on Passover. And I think it brings out multiple aspects like Deuteronomy 9 or Deuteronomy 16. I do believe it's a mixture of law of Moses portion of what's supposed to be done on Passover. And hopefully I made that clear. And just Passover itself is kind of mixed together. Numbers 9, some of the symbolism that I think points to people who receive the terrestrial glory in the resurrection. Leviticus 23 doesn't really say much. And then we did a lot on Exodus 12 and bringing out symbolism in that one. I know Zach had something that he wanted to share, but I think we'll have to, I'll put a link into it in the comments, but I personally don't have time tonight. I'm sorry.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I heard that you're supposed to like burn stuff that makes leaven, right?
So on leaven, you're supposed to get rid of leaven out of your house, and it's
Out of your house.
yeah,
All
and you
yeast.
don't have to burn
Wow.
it, you just get rid of it. And it's not all leaven, it's in fact Paul talks about it as a lump because it's in, oh, I forget where, hold on, I have notes. In fact,
As
maybe
we
I
were-
might do a little bit more where I shouldn't, but
As we were going over Exodus 12, I was wondering if it was in there, but I didn't see it.
No,
Oh
it's
no, that's I want
the
unleavened
burning.
bread.
The burning of leaven. The burning of all leavened products is a product of Pharisaical tradition.
Yeah. You just have to get rid of your bread starter. That's what is
Yeah.
being talked about in actual.
Is it like stuff like
Baker's yeast.
It's not even the yeast that you need to get up. So
the baking soda?
yeast is in the air. Literally, it's in the
Right.
air. And in fact, when you
If
go buy
want to get rid
grapes,
of all leaven in your house, you have to.
All right.
You'd
you
have
have
to
to
you'd
get
have
rid
to
of
suck-
the air.
Yeah.
Well, right, but like, but okay, wait, okay, bread starter. Okay, I'm thinking baking yeast, baker's yeast, a specific type of yeast.
No,
The stuff that makes your bread rise.
but that's not what is all yeast makes things rise. It's the bread starter, because so there's yeast in the air, and the white stuff that's on your grapes when you buy them from the grocery store, that's yeast, and it's actually enough
get that.
yeast to make a weak wine, and that is
Yes.
done by leavening. And so you can't get rid of all of it. And in
So
um
you're missing what I'm saying.
oh, okay, you
What
want
I'm
to say it
saying
again?
is, so there's a different type. There are different types of bread starter. There's a bread starter that's called baker's yeast. That is the stuff that makes your bread rise. Is that one of the things that I've got to get rid of?
Well, no, but I'm saying it's not that. I'm saying it's actually so the bread starter is a lump that's actually is bread that they keep around for the whole year. So every year they get rid of that dough, the bread, the actual physical dough, and get rid of it. Because
Well, I don't have any actual physical dough.
well, then
you don't have to get rid of it.
Then you don't have
So
to get
then
rid
I
of
don't
it.
have to get rid of it.
Correct.
how about stuff like
Oh,
baking soda?
oh.
No, it's not baking soda.
No.
I don't know who would be teaching you to get rid of baking soda.
I don't know.
Since I'm having a hard time
No.
finding it in my notes.
I thought it was like a thing that could help rise the bread.
No, it's okay. So it's talking about old,
Yeah, it's talking,
old bread.
yeah, it's
Hey, look.
talking, the way that they did bread back then is they started it from a starter.
Yeah,
Pulled a little bit of
they had
dough out.
dough. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, I got you.
Rid of
This
the
old
old
leaven,
leaven that you may
see,
be
the-
a new.
get rid of the old leaven that you may be new leaven batch. So in the King James that says a lump. In fact, I think that's a better translation in this case. So I mean, King James isn't complete garbage. Anyways,
So in other words, I can still make unleavened bread with baking yeast. So
no,
is that what you're
because
saying?
no, because that's you're then making a
Okay.
bread
You
starter.
just don't
it's
have
like-
to get rid of it.
I just don't have to get rid of my baker's yeast. Because that would
Right.
make my
You
life.
can't
really
go put
much
it into
harder.
dough because then you're making a new bread starter before you're allowed to.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
So,
So basically, my bread dough, what I have in it right now: salt, baker's yeast, nutritional yeast, sugar,
Oh.
flour.
well, actually,
think-
salt can be 11. So if you have dough with salt in it, I would say get rid of it. But
Get rid of the salt.
no, we'll get rid of the bread, the dough that has.
Yeah, no, when I'm making my, listen to me.
Sorry.
So when I'm making my dough, I need to not add salt or baker's yeast or nutritional yeast. That's what you're saying.
Correct. That is what I'm saying.
So sugar and flour, basically. I'm making pancakes.
I don't know if you would add sugar, but anyways, you don't add anything to
Well,
leaven.
that's what I add to my bread. That's what I put in my bread. I add
If you
sugar
take
to
out
it.
if you take out the bread, or if you take out the salt and and all the yeasts, what he's left with is flour and sugar.
Well, then
and
do
water.
that. I'm not a cooking expert,
Yeah.
but
Perfect.
here's the verse I'm
I
looking
just
for.
want-
No, I think the King James translates this a little better. Purge out therefore the old leaven that you may be a new lump. That lump is that dough
Gotcha.
starter. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not the
Gotcha.
yeast that's everywhere. It's that bread starter. And that's why Paul here is saying lump. It's that dough that you keep pulling from to get the starter. As ye
Gotcha.
are unleavened, for even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us.
Okay. Well,
I might
that
have-
makes a
We get
lot-
rid of the old teaching so that way we can start accepting the new teachings. What do you want to say, Zach?
I think I got that idea from the River Winds in their video about how they do Passover.
I know some of their stuff. I'm not real familiar with theirs, but baking soda makes makes no logical sense to me. Getting rid of like yeast in the house makes a little more sense to me, as a a Passover reading of it, but not understanding everything that's the culture and the context, and also leaving out Paul as we bring out here, right? I just I don't know how you get baking soda. I can understand how some people get yeast. I do believe it's incorrect as I demonstrated here, but yeah, baking soda, I have no idea. Sorry. I just have no idea.
I think they might be listening to the rabbis.
Could be. I don't know a tradition on that one, but I don't study the rabbis much. So one thing
You know,
I
the
do
rabbi,
wanna-
Sorry.
I do
Yeah,
want to bring out
yeah.
one other thing real quick. Just as it's this one. So one thing that's interesting.
Yeah.
I want to end with this. The first fruits, which is near the beginning of unleavened bread, right? It's about the resurrection. Now, one thing I find interesting that the things that you're supposed to do in first fruits actually points us to the law of Moses that has to happen with the daily 2 lambs. And in my opinion, that's to tell us who is the first fruits? It is that lamb that was
Yeah.
sacrificed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
Um,
then resurrected as the
yes.
first fruits of those who, slept.
But
Yeah.
and I don't want to do a whole bunch of this, but those who know what the law of Moses is, those connects. And I'll just show it one more, the other one, so that people can read it and pause it, because I am way past my time.
A quick question.
It connects. So go ahead, Zach.
The first fruits, like a lot of it, it's observance is like through the temple, right?
Yeah, that's at the temple.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
so. What do
Most of
how do we observe it now? Like the first fruits.
Do as close as you can. If you can get some barley, go wave it up. Also, there you can go do some of this. You can do some of that, but the most common thing that I've seen is people have a meal and then wave some wheat or barley. I would say barley because that's the one that's going to be at that time. It's just some people get the wheat and the barley mixed up on their seasons. It should be barley.
Maybe we can address some of that like next time.
Sure, we can. I'm past my
will
time.
this will
Sorry.
that be after the fact? Will that be after the fact?
No, it'll be the day before.
First fruits happens after our next meeting.
Oh,
First fruits
Okay.
is after the Sabbath, right?
oh, yep.
The day
That's
after.
right. That's
So
right.
we'll be
Yeah.
fine.
It's during, it's what the, yeah.
Yeah,
It's the
so
day
we-
after.
yeah.
The
So
3
yeah.
days and 3 nights. It's the day after. But anyways,
Okay.
it's the day after
Yeah.
the Sabbath, right? But the 16th.
Yeah, it's getting too late. It's getting too late for me.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
My brain's not tracking much right now.
do you have a question or a closing statement, Kesley, that you want to do?
Oh, no, I don't.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it's good to call it a night.
Absolutely.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
I'm
Shalom.
gonna pause.